2024. This meeting is being webcast with the exception of any business that Council resolves to exclude the press and public because of likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the Local Government Act 1972. This meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting with members attending in person at the Council Chamber, County Hall, Ruthin, or also remotely via video conference. Those attending remotely are kindly asked to mute their microphones unless they are called upon to speak. Members are also asked to have their video switched on throughout the meeting unless I specifically request you to turn your video off to improve the quality of the audio link when you are speaking. You will be expected to restart your video once you have finished speaking. Please also refrain from using the chat facility as messages sent to all are visible on the webcast. To aid transparency, all meetings business must be conducted through the chair. Thank you. Okay, now we'll go to apologies.
Chair, we've received one apology from Councillor Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones.
Thank you. And no declarations of interest, please, Gary.
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd, yn ei wneud hwn yn y Gymraeg. Bydd aelodau yn ymwybodol o'r gyfyniad o dan god ymddygiad y Cyngor i ddatgan unrhyw gysylltiad personol neu sy'n rhagfarnu mewn perthynas ag unrhyw busnes i'w ystyried yn y cyfarfod heddiw. Dylai cysylltiadau o'r fath gael eu datgelu nawr, neu gyntedd y bydd y cynghorydd yr effeithir arnynt yn ymwybodol fod ganddynt gysylltiad personol neu sy'n rhagfarnu yn y materion heddiw. Mae'n ofynnol i holl aelodau sy'n datgan cysylltiad i nodi'n glir beth yw'r cysylltiad ac i hysbysu pa un a yw'n gysylltiad personol neu'n gysylltiad personol sy'n rhagfarnu fel y diffiniwyd yn y cod ymddygiad. Mae'n ofynnol i unrhyw aelod sy'n datgan cysylltiad sy'n rhagfarnu adael y cyfarfod yn ystod y drafodaeth ac ni ellir cymryd rhan mewn unrhyw drafodion. Gall aelodau a ddiddordeb personol yn unig gymryd rhan yn y drafodaeth ac unrhyw bleidlais. Os bydd cysylltiad personol neu cysylltiad personol sy'n rhagfarnu yn cael ei ddatgelu heddiw, nad yw wedi ddatgelu a'i gofnodi yn blaenorol, bydd yn ofynnol i'r cynghorydd dan sylw lenwi a llofnodi ffurflen datgan cysylltiad sydd yna ar gael gan staff cefnogi'r pwyllgor sy'n bresennol heddiw neu ar-lein.
Thank you, Gary. Have we got any members' interest? Mervyn, Parry, had your hand up?
Chair and members, as we get ready for Agenda 3 today, the vote of no confidence against the Leader and Cabinet, I encourage all members to think carefully about what their vote might mean. Our democracy relies on transparency.
We've not started this, Mervyn. Mervyn, we've not started yet. Sorry, I can't let you carry on yet. That's not part of my speech. Thank you. Alluded to. Sorry, Gwen, I didn't see your hand.
Sorry, since this is a very important discussion, I think it may be appropriate for all councillors that are online to have their cameras on. I
did ask them to do that.
I appreciate that you did, Chair, yes.
Could members online put the cameras on, please? Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Okay, I shall move now to agenda item 3. Sorry.
Councillor David Williams.
David Williams. I'm not getting anywhere, Gwen, so we'll have to cut him off or assume he's not there. David, if you don't come on with the next three, there we are. Thank you. Okay, right. Now I shall move to agenda item 3. Notice of motion. And can I ask you, Hilditch Roberts, to do that, please?
Thank you, Chair Boridar. The motion is before you, as set out in the papers. So I'd like to propose this motion going forward, please.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Okay, right. We shall move along now to the group leaders to speak in the following order. And as the mover of the motion, I'll ask Hugh again now to expand on the motion. Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this motion, I want to make it very clear that this is not a personal motion from the independent group. It's probably been one of the most difficult decisions as a group we've made, bringing this to this arena. No matter what party would have been at the table, this in this state of time, we would have brought this motion forward. So I want to make that very clear. And there's nothing political in this, other than we genuinely want to raise the concerns of our residents in our communities. We put residents first, not politics. And what we feel is that the role of the Cabinet is to put the whole of Denbighshire first, not just their patch. And I think that's very important in this debate. When I hear a colleague of mine say they've spoken to a Cabinet member, says everything's okay in my patch, so we should be okay. It's not just about your patch, it's the whole 96,000 people in Denbighshire that we're concerned about. Every single one of us in this room has had complaints from residents, especially over the last 14, 15 weeks. Some very emotional complaints, some really difficult complaints. We've seen vulnerable people struggle in a time of need. There's someone singing in the yard. Tactical interruption. As a group, we've never been scared of change or a change of culture. But we have to embrace it if it's for the better. And what we have to address in this room today, I don't want this debate to be one of mudslinging. I don't want it to be one of politics. And I don't want it to be one of a blame game. I've heard Westminster, I've heard Cardiff's fault. What we're debating today is the performance of our council. And that is the focus of this debate. I preempt that the defence of the bins will be, the concept was brought in the last administration. Yes, it was, factually. In the minutes, you'll see that I actually said I was disappointed that it was only the 8 Cabinet members in the room and no other county councillors attended the debate, because I said it was the most important change in Denbighshire that would happen. I think that was in 2021, and that's in the minutes. But we need to be clear, there's a difference between a concept and the implementation of. And what we've seen with the bins is the implementation of, which has not worked. And I want to give an example is, when I was lead member of education, I took on 5 projects which were concept in the previous cabinet, and I had to implement in my cabinet. That was the building of Rose Street, Penbarras, Llanfair, CYHOEDD, and others. I took that mantle and delivered it on budget, on time. And that was my responsibility. I took the baton off Errol Williams at that time. I said 2.5 years ago in May, when I stood before you presenting my presentation as leader, that my concern was that we become an officer-led authority. And my feeling is now we are at a point. We are totally officer-led. And what really tipped it for me was the last briefing on the waste, where members had a load of questions and the lead member never answered a single one. And that was disappointing, because it's your subject, you should know it, and you should be able to answer it and to defend those questions. The leader was nominated by Julie Matthews on a ticket of moving Denbighshire forward and wanting DCC to be an outstanding service provider throughout Wales. We now are a shadow of that. We were an outstanding council. And I've heard the 14 years of austerity. Well, there was 12 of that where this council was a high-performing council. And when we see a situation now where we have directors collecting cardboard, heads of service collecting cardboards on a Saturday, and great for them. But that shows that the model is broken if we're paying our directors to go out on the streets. Jason also stood on climate change at the heart of all the decisions, is what Jason said. Yeah, we have disposed of the most eco-friendly building we have or in the process of in Cadeiriydd, making our 2 other offices not as eco-friendly as the one we got getting rid of. Jason committed to education. where we've seen a 3%, and well, sorry, the words you used was no child to be left behind. We've already seen a 3% cut budgets in education. And he also said he'd continue to invest in 21st century schools. In the 2.5 years, we haven't seen a single new build in Ddinbych, where there was 5 in the last administration. So that has a knock-on effect for our children, our vulnerable, and also the Welsh language in education. I think Jason also mentioned that the Welsh language was important. Promote the Welsh language, I think you said, Jason. Well, we've got less speakers now and less speakers in the authority on the Welsh language. So that has dropped. Also because there's been no investment in new schools in the 21st century programme. And I think you're probably all sitting here saying, well, that's Hilditch giving his view. He's narrow-minded. He's just, you know, playing games. Well, let me give you the only benchmark that I can share with you that is our stakeholders and how they view us. And this was in the last report to Council in June, where, if I may refer, the percentage of stakeholders agree that Ddinbych has a prosperous economy that provides access to the right skills, jobs and income. The opinion, only 30% of stakeholders agree with that, and that's worse from 2022 to 23, which was 40%. So the perception is going backwards. The next benchmark was the percentage of stakeholders who agree that Ddinbych has the transport and road infrastructure to support thriving, cohesive and well-connected communities. That's 28% only believe in that, and that's got worse. The percentage of stakeholders who agree that the rich cultural heritage and natural assets of Ddinbych are being used to their full potential. That's only 49%, and that's getting worse. These are things that we should be benchmarking at the highest level, and that is not occurring. Jason also committed that poverty was very important, and and housing was very important. He wanted to grasp the nettle around housing, and I remember we had a debate about the previous administration delivery and what Jason's targets were. To date, only 33 council houses have been built in this administration, far stretching, not stretching the target as expected. My feeling, and the feeling of my group, is currently we are an authority being led, and we are managing the decline of this authority, not the ambition and not the growth that we've seen over previous years. We've seen the Shared Prosperity Fund be used to pluck holes in staffing budgets and not be used enough in the communities. We've seen some of you in this council chamber voted a budget with a 3 million deficit, which is unheard of and unprecedented before in my time as 12 years as a councillor. We take the Queen's Market, which is empty. It's cost money, it's cost millions. We were unable to get a provider to deliver in there, even though Ddinbych Leisure was an option, which even the director of Ddinbych Leisure voted against it at the time. Why were we not supporting local providers rather going outside of our county at this time? And we are left with that empty, with nobody running it. And we know the experience Ddinbych Leisure have, how they've transformed Prestatyn and Rhyl as an offering in that time. I think that was naive not to take that option. I'm going to touch on libraries because it means so much to everyone in the communities. And that has been a massive hit to everyone. And I think it's had a massive economic knock-on the footfall of our towns. And I think that is a true reflection. The toilets, like the libraries, was dropped on us without any metrics. We never had the science behind at the time when it was announced. In fact, the libraries was announced to the press before it was to members. Communication is key to all members to be inclusive. And you might remember that I referred to that when I sat in front of you. We have a planning system delay that is holding back the economic growth of Ddinbych, which is really concerning considering when we've had ambition board money for Denbighshire for the North Wales Hospital, yet there's a planning backlog that does not enable that development to move forward quickly. We have a levelling up at risk because our planning is weeks and weeks and weeks behind. I have had emails of businesses who are trying to invest in Ruthin or the surrounding areas because they can't get planning fast enough. Is a concern that they might pull out of Denbighshire. The message needs to be we want businesses to grow and prosper in Denbighshire, not outside of our county. And then I want to talk with the debates that Gwyneth and I had on the council tax, which the first year I think it was 3.6 and the second year was 9.8. I might be a point out a couple of... But that is not a good message to our residents, because what we're facing with this recycling, we're going to be looking at an even bigger council tax again. And I think none of us came in to represent our residents to grow council tax. I don't want to dwell on the bins because I'm sure on the waste, but I want to take you back to a conversation that I had at Cabinet with Graham. When I said at Cabinet and challenged, I said, you're in the storm here, you're in the middle of the ocean, you need to decide to go left or right, pause and think, rather than just keep on going. And I remember Graham says, we're in it too far, we need to keep on going. And Jason's line was, we need to get it over the line. But we are now 14, 15 weeks of a storm that keeps on giving, of a storm that keeps on costing, of a storm that keeps the reputation damage of Denbighshire County Council growing. We have vulnerable, we have AHP collections. We even had a phone message last week that if you ring up, if you want a bulk collection or a AHP collection, please put the phone down now. That's not an engaging council for me. And the cost will be highlighted, no doubt. And my main concern is the failing of this system now is having a huge knock-on effect on other services in our council. We are seeing staff being asked to prop up the waste service. There are long waiting times in the call centre, or if they're not getting answered at all because they're understaffed, and the pressure those people have to face on the front line is awful because of the disarray. They're asking questions of the waste service, they're not getting answers back. In many ways, some of the councillors aren't either. I think, you know, our social medias are overrun with bins. The pressure on our staff, the pressure on the street scene is massive. And we have to recognise that. And each and every one of us in this room have to recognise that there is a crisis, and sometimes we have to face it and work together to get back to it. Over many years, Denbighshire has worked hard to be close to the communities and its residents. Now we are closer to Cardiff than our own communities. And I urge you to support this motion for the future and the well-being of Denbighshire residents and their staff.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Just got in time. I'd like to ask now the group leader from the Conservatives to respond.
Borodar, good morning, everybody. I'll try not to repeat too much of what Councillor Hilditch has just said, but I would make the point that after 2 years in office, this present administration have little to be proud of. They came into office inheriting a reasonably satisfactory financial situation, but now we see financial difficulties, cost overruns, particularly with the new waste scheme, and a reliance on cutbacks, redundancies presented as a voluntary exit scheme, resulting in difficulties in delivering many of our essential services to the traditional standard that our residents have come to expect. The budget presented by the lead member to the council earlier this year, in our group's view, was flawed, as it was not balanced in the traditional way as many would expect, but relied on assumptions about savings which are not yet apparent, particularly when we look at the new waste scheme. All this was pointed out at the budget meeting and ignored, and our warnings are now coming home to roost. There has been an exit of experienced officers that has left the council severely weakened and suffering low morale in some areas. Other senior officers have left for their own reasons, and there are tales of staff feeling undervalued and wondering what future Denbighshire holds for them. The public perception and reputation of Denbighshire has never been so low, and I'm not proud of that, and there seems little political will to talk things up. Efforts to regenerate the very important tourist industry seem to have completely stalled. But again, where is the political will to drive things up? The only answers seem to be to cut our much-loved library services, consult on withdrawing from providing public toilets, on which so many of our population depend, and it is significant that a large public meeting which was held in Llangollen recently, I am told, was not deemed worthy of attendance by a cabinet member to support the case for withdrawal. In the face of all this and more, all our cabinet seem able to do is to point at expensive green policies, and when you point this out to the public, a large body of them just laugh, point to uncut grass verges and overgrown areas, and in a county which already enjoys huge natural green areas of woodland and open spaces. Our cabinet just seemed to unable to grasp where residents' priorities lie. All this is and more evidences the apparent lack of concern the leader and the cabinet have for the residents who elected them. The press and social media reflect this with comments which I've seen to include inexperience, incompetent, uncaring. Their words, not mine, but it all reflects disillusionment with the ruling administration. When members raise concerns, the answer is often to attack them, and these are the reasons why the Conservative group will support this motion of no confidence. There is another way. Things can be turned around, but to do so, a lot of new thinking is needed. But it will need an administration that ceases to pursue ideology, that will stand up to diktat from the Welsh Government, abandon short-term thinking, listen to their public and use foresight, but above all, recognise that we are all here to serve our public.
Thank you, Hugh. Okay, Martin from the Greens, please.
Thanks, Chair. As a council, we decided on having a thorough inquiry into the rollout of the new recycling system. But 4 independent group members forced a vote in the scrutiny chairs and vice chairs group to make this an independent inquiry, which was against the advice of officers who said it would cost a fortune and that we did not yet have a scope for the inquiry. And now, before any inquiry has taken place, before we even have a scope for that inquiry, the independent group, supported by the Conservative group, have predetermined the outcome of any inquiry and decided a vote of no confidence is warranted. If this is just predisposition, we shouldn't be jumping to a vote of no confidence. And we simply shouldn't be predetermined. We should be designing our own thorough inquiry into the rollout of this new service and acting on it after we have all the answers and information. Why are we having a vote of no confidence now? Is the timing more to suit political agendas and the upcoming by-election? Is the recent press article that made every effort to reflect the full spectrum of only the Conservative members' views just a coincidence? To address the claims made in this motion, they're all very valid concerns, right? And the Green Group 100% support these being quantified and contextualised so we can properly assess the magnitude and severity and make an informed decision as to whether they have been caused by poor governance or not. It does appear that the amount set aside in the project plan for contingency has been exceeded, but the claims of impacts to frontline services and immense financial implications seem overblown and not well informed. Surely we should not be drawing conclusions like this until after an inquiry. How have the independent group reached the conclusion that this must be down solely to effective leadership and lack of strategy? Or have I understood what independent inquiry means? This project was conceived, as mentioned, under the previous administration. Yet prior to its launch, we saw it set up to fail by the very politicians who led it in the press and have used it as a political football to criticise their opponents. how will any council implement the transformational changes that we're told we are needed to provide public services in the future without a transformational change in the way we do politics? Because it's not working this way. Why would anyone take the political risk of transformational change? It just leaves you wide open to attacks from opponents. One would have hoped that if there was any project that we could all get behind to get the public on board and make it a success, it would be one that had been conceived and progressed under one administration and adopted by the next, had the potential to save money in the long run, create local jobs and raise our recycling rates to world-leading levels. We should have all been behind this from the start, from before it rolled out and throughout its rollout, and made it a success. A vote of no confidence will do nothing to benefit residents of Denbighshire, absolutely nothing. If anything, it will make the situation worse, distracting the administration further with a reshuffle while members get used to new positions. To call for a vote of no confidence now, before an inquiry, fills me with no confidence at all that they would do a better job in administration if they're going to make serious decisions before reviewing all the information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Martin. Going from the Plaid
Chair,
Cymru, sorry.
Chair,
Sorry, I'm not having any more.
that was a misleading
Yeah,
statement.
I'm going
No
to the next one.
inquiry.
No, I'm sorry. I've said I'll let them go in order, then you can have you speak after. Thank you. Plaid Cymru, please. Della, sorry. Go on.
Mi fyddai'n siarad yn Gymraeg. Please ffordd barod gyntaf. Rwy'n munud i chi wneud hynny. Diolch yn fawr. Ar hwn i ddechrau, dwi fynegu yn siomedig gyda'r cynghorydd Hugh Hilditch Roberts am ddod y hyn ger yn bron i heddiw, ond hefyd trwy ddiolch iddo fo am wneud hynny. A trwy wneud hynny, rhoi'r cyfle i ni gyd edrych ar y materion sy'n ymwneud â'r newid yn y gwasanaeth newydd a phethau eraill, ac ailgylchu yn ogystal a materion perthnasol eraill. Ni hoffwn ni hefyd wneud yn glir mwyn ysgoi pob amheuaeth bod y datganiadau dwi'n mynd i wneud yn cael ei gwneud gyda chymeradwyaeth lawn holl aelodau grŵp Plaid Cymru, nid oherwydd mod i'n siarad ar ei cyfer, nac oherwydd mod i wedi chwipio'r aelodau i gymryd safbwynt unedig. Ond oherwydd trafodaeth didwyll, gored, rhydd a democrataeth yn cynnwys holl aelodau'n grŵp. Yn ystod y cyfnod hwn, bu yn edrych yn ofalus iawn ar y mater, ac yn dod i farn sy'n adlewyrchu barn ein holl aelodau. Felly, mi hoffwn ni ddechrau drwy gyfeirio at agwedd y gall pob un ohonom dwi'n siŵr gytuno arni. A hynny yw bod cyflwyno'r gwasanaeth newydd ymhell o fod yn ddelfrydol, nac yn wir yn dderbyniol, a bod agweddau o'r newid wedi achosi sawl her, rhwystredigaeth a straen i drigolion, aelodau a swyddogion fel ei gilydd. Yn wir, dyn ni fel grŵp yn cymeradwyo'n llwyr ac yn croesawu'r alwed am broses graffu lawn. Proses, os cofio ein iawn, y gyfonwyd amdani gan yr arweinydd Jason Glellen a'i gabinets. Cyfle i graffu'n llawn ar y broses gyfan maes y law, fel y gellir gofyn cwestiynau, derbyn atebion a deall pa wersi i'w dysgu a allai gefnogi newidiadau mor allweddol, a raddfa fawr i wasanaethau'r awdurdod yn y dyfodol. Proses sydd dwi'n meddwl yn cael ei drafod ar hyn o bryd, a credu bod hon yn broses proffesiynol, adeiladol, sy'n darparu trylwyder ac atebolrwydd, ac yn ein barn ni sydd i dylid delia a materion. Ond gyda risg o swnio fel pennaeth, beth bynnag mae hynny'n ei olygu, rhywbeth dwi wedi cael yngyhyddo honno'n fwy nag un achlysur gan y cynghorydd Hugh Hilditch Roberts yn y siamber yma. Ond dyna dwi'n mynd i wneud. Hoffwn yn awr nodi ar bas ail o grŵp Plaid Cymru wedi dod i'n casgliad. O flynyddoedd o brofiad yn ymdrin â materion ac anghytudebau fel pennaeth, dwi bob amser wedi credu mwyn bod yn deg, yn gytbwys ac yn gywir, bod hi'n holl bwysig bod casgliadau a penderfyniadau yn seiliedig ar ffeithiau yn hytrach na barn yn unig. A ystyried nad yw'r broses craffu y gyfonwyd amdani wedi chaniatáu I fynd rhagddi, eto cyn i'r cynnig hwn gael ei gyflwyno, rhywbeth dwi'n cytuno efo'r cynghorydd Martin Hogg ynglyn â fo. Rydym wedi cymryd amser I edrych ar y ffeithiau sydd gennym ni. Hoffwn amlinellu rhai o'r pethau allweddol ond credaf ffeithiau perthnasol. Dyn ni'n gwybod y tu hwnt I bob amheuaeth, a mae gennau'r cyfnodion o ymlaen I fan hyn. Dwi'n troi gyntaf at y gwasanaeth gwastraff ac ailgylchu. A mi fyddai'n mynd trwy rhai o'r prif ffeithiau dwi'n wybod. Mae'n ffaith, mae ar y 5 ar 20 o Hydref 2018 y penderfynodd yr arweinydd blaenorol a'r weinyddiaeth ar y pryd o dan arweiniad cynghorydd Brian Jones, yr aelod arweiniol I wneud newid sylweddol yn y gwasanaeth gwastraff ac ailgylchu, bydd yr agenda amgylcheddol a newid yn yr hinsawdd sy'n ogystal â chyfeirio at y pwynt ar y pryd oedd 807 o filoedd o arbedion cost gwasanaeth refeniw. Penderfynod gafod ei grisawu a'i gymeradwyo'n fawr gan bob aelod o'r cabinet. Ffaith. 18 o Rhagfyr 2018, bydd cabinet yn ystyried yr ymarfer modelu ac gynhalwyd a nodi'r model gweithredu newydd gorau ar gyfer dyluniad y gwasanaeth newydd. Erbyn hyn, arbediad refeniw o tua rhwng 500 a 750 o filoedd. Oherwydd pwysau ac amgylchiadau sy'n newid dros amser. Ffaith. Hefyd, mis Rhagfyr, bydd cabinet yn trafod ac yn argymell ac yn cymeradwyo polisi gwastraff cartrefi diwygiedig ac yn lluniwyd I gefnogi'r gwaith o weithredu a rheoleiddio'r gwasanaeth. Ffaith arall I chi. Fel rhan o'r drafodaeth, nododd y cynghorydd Brian Jones a dyfyno byddai tua 500,000 o arbedion cost gwasanaeth ac 20 o swyddi newydd yn cael eu creu. Felly mi roedd yna'r ddealltwriaeth ynglyn â'r personel. Ffaith. Nodwyd hefyd yng nghofnodion yr un cyfarfod gyfeiriad at gynllun gwasanaeth newydd yn amlinellu'r model darparu newydd a gymeradwywyd gan y cabinet ar y pwynt yma. Oni fyddai hyn wedi golygu bod angen monitor gofynion gweithredu'n drylwyr, megis y cerbydau, y gofynion personel, a rowndiau, ymarferion amser. Mesurau mwyn deall yr arbediad crybwylledig o 500,000 awgrymwyd ar y pryd. Roedd cyfarfod dilynol ar ddiwedd 2020 ac yn ystod 2021 yn ymdrin ar broses dendro ar gyfer penodi prif gontractwyr, ar gyfer y newid graddol sydd ei angen ar gyfer y ganolfan. Croesawyd, argymhellwyd a chymeradwywyd y cwbl gan y weinyddiaeth blaenorol. Ffaith. 23 o Dachwedd 2021 trafodwyd y broses dendro ar gyfer caffael y fflyd cerbydau a chymeradwyo a chytuno gan y weinyddiaeth blaenorol. Penderfynwyd a wnaed gyda pheth BRYS mwyn cael y gorchymyn tendro'n barod ar y gyfer dyddiad cau o 11 o fis Rhagfyr 2021. Ffaith. Afrysiwyd y penderfyniad hwn, pa broses gynhaliwyd bryd hynny I benderfynu ar y nifer, maint a math priodol o gerbydau byddai ei hangen I sicrhau gwasanaeth effeithlon I Sir Ddinbych gyfan. Byddwn wedi disgwyl y byddai angen deall y cylchoedd casglu a chynnal astudiaethau amser a symud ar gyfer cwblhau'r cylchoedd hynny. Gwybodaeth byddai'n rhan allweddol o ddeall y nifer, math, maint o gerbydau byddai hangen. Dyma un o'r prif faterion a greuodd yr anawsterau wrth gyflwyno'r gwasanaeth newydd yn ddiweddar. A wnaeth yr aelod arweiniol a'r arweinydd ar y pryd graffu ar fanylion y gofynion hyn cyn argymell o ddogfen dendro a chaffael. Yn olaf, ar y 12 o Ebrill 2022, pan gafodd achos busnes diwygiadau terfynol ei gyflwyno a'i gymeradwyo gan y Cabinet yn un o'r cyfarfodydd olaf fel gweinyddiaeth. Cytundeb di-droi nôl, ac un yr oeddent yn ymfalchio ynddo. Ffaith. Felly nid concept oedd hyn, ond rhywbeth wedi cael ei arwyddo a'i roi gerbron fel cytundeb di-droi nôl. Felly droi nawr at yr arweinyddiaeth a'r Cabinet presennol, mae'n gywir i ddeud bod y weinyddiaeth presennol wedi mabwysiadu y polisïau, y cyfeiriad strategol a'r gwasanaeth o ddarparwyd ac y gymeradwywyd gan y Cabinet blaenorol yn ddidwyll. Cerbydau nifer y swyddi ac yn y blaen. Ffaith. Cynllun oedd wedi gymeradwyo gan holl aelodau y weinyddiaeth ddiwethaf. O dan arweinyddiaeth Cynghorydd Hugh Evans, cynllun yr oedd y cynghorwyr Hugh Hilditch-Roberts, Bobby Feely a Brian Jones yn ymfalchio ynddo ar y pryd, am ei gyfraniad sylweddol i'r agenda newid amgylcheddol a'r newid hinsawdd. Yr un aelodau sydd bellach yn ceisio mynd yn groes i'w penderfyniadau hunain. Ac yn bellai oddi wrth bob cyfrifoldeb, pan fo sialensau wedi codi. Dwi ddim yn ystyried hynny'n arweinyddiaeth dda. Nid lle'r weinyddiaeth bresennol yw mynd drwy fanylion cynlluniau a gymeradwywyd gan y weinyddiaeth flaenorol, wedi'r pwynt o ddim troi nôl, gyda thentro a chaffael eisoes fynd heibio. Ac felly fel grŵp, nid ydym yn credu y gellir dal y weinyddiaeth hon yn gyfrifol am gamau posib y weinyddiaeth flaenorol. Ni ellir chwaith dal arweinwyr gwleidyddol yn atebol am yr heriau gweithredol o ddydd i ddydd, a all ac sy'n digwydd. Lorien torri lawr, absynoldebau staff, materion technoleg mewn cyfannau nad oeddynt wedi gweithio yn ôl y disgwyl, cyn iddynt godi hyd yn oed. Yr cwbl yna, dyn ni wedi glywed yn briffio yn ystod y cyfnod yma, wedi cyfrannu tuag at hyn. Mae pob un ohonynt ar y cyd a mewn mannau y cerbydau maint anghywir, yn enwedig ar gyfer y cylchoedd gwledig, yr heriau gyda rowndiau, dwi'n ame sydd wedi bod yn un o'r methiannau mwyaf, a brofwyd yn ystod y broses o gyflwyno'r newid sylweddol hwn i'r gwasanaeth. Credwn fod y ffeithiau hyn yn tynnu sylw at gymhlethdod cynllunio, gweithredu a chyflawni newid sylweddol o'r fath i wasanaethau ar gyfer 42,000 o gartrefi ar draws yr awdurdod. Credwn ei bod yn anheg i ddosrannu cyfrifoldeb llawn ac unigol i'r weinyddiaeth presennol, pan bod eraill wedi cytuno ar elfennau sylfaenol o ddyluniad a chymeradwyaeth y gwasanaeth. Heb y broses graffu llawn, credwn ni bod yn rhy gynnar i gael effeithiau llawn ac felly'n amrhiodol i ddod i farn ynglŷn â pwy sy'n atebol. Dwi am droi rwan yn fyr at rhai o'r pwyntiau eraill sydd hefyd wedi gwneud mewn cysylltiad â'r cynnig diffyg hyder hwn ychydig mwy effeithiau os gai. Dwi am adael rhai ohonyn nhw i Jason ateb amdanyn nhw, ond mae gen i rai pwyntiau dwi am ei gwneud. Yn ystod llynedd, ac ynglŷn â'r gyllideb, bu pob un ohonyn ni fel cynghorwyr yn rhan o drafodaethau niferus dan arweiniad ar arweinydd a'r aelod arweiniol dros gyllid Cynghorydd Gwynedd Ellis mwyn mantoli diffyg heriol yn y gyllideb. Diffyg oedd yn uwch nag y brofodd yr awdurdod erioed o'r blaen. Ddeutu 25 miliwn dwi'n iawn gynneth saith. Roedd hyn hefyd yn ddarlun yr oedd pob awdurdod yng Nghymru a thu hwnt yn dod ar ei draws. Ffaith. Roedd yn rhaid gwneud penderfyniadau anodd mwyn mantoli ein llyfrau ac osgoi'r risg o feithdaliad. Ffaith. Credwn ei bod yn annidwyll i rai aelodau awgrymu y gellid bod wedi osgoi'r mesurau arbed costau hyn yn gyfan gwbl. Pan roddwyd y niferoedd i'r holl aelodau, pan gafwyd nifer o weithdau a sesiynau briffio, gyda nifer o gyfleoedd cynhwysfawr i aelodau meinciau cefn gynnig dewis arall, credadwy a chyrreiddadwy. Atebion na chafwyd mahonynt. Ac eithrio efallai bodolaeth coeden arian hyd sy'n ymddangos bod gen rhai aelodau'n cuddio yn ei gardd cefn. O ran y gystyngiad anffodus a digroesi'n oriau'r llyfrgell, bydd rhaid i gymryd mae'n effeithiol a anghywir i ddweud bod yr ymgynghoriad cyhoeddus wedi anwybyddu, gan bod yr aelod arweinol y cynghorydd Emrys Wyn wedi herio swyddogion yn gadarn, ac wrth wneud hynny, lleihawyd y gostyngiad oriau o'r 50% i'r 4%, a lle na fu ar yr agenda ar unrhyw adeg i gau llyfrgelloedd. A hefyd, maen nhw wedi gosod tasglu llyfrgell mwyn ymchwilio'n rhagweithiol i sut y gall y gwasanaeth draws newid mewn ffyrdd creadigol i'r dyfodol. Dyma sut mae delio gyda amgylchiadau heriol. Dim claddu'ch pen yn y tywod a cheisio ymbyllhau chi yn rhag cyfrifoldeb yn ystod cyfnodau o her ac adfyd, fel mae rhai wedi ceisio ei wneud. Nid hynny yw arweiniad da. Arweinyddiaeth yw gwneud penderfyniadau anodd mewn modd amserol, cadarn, fel y credaf y dangoswyd ar ran grŵp Plaid Cymru gan Cyngorwyr Gwyneth Ellis ac Emrys Wyn a'r arweinyddiaeth hon. Ostyried natur yr amgylchiadau eithriadol a'r dystiolaeth ffeithiol fel yr amlinellais sydd wedi wynebu'r arweinydd a'r arweinyddiaeth bresennol, y penderfyniadau ynglyn â'r gwastraff ac ailgylchu, y pwysau cyllidebau allanol ar ein cyllideb yng Nghymru a thu hwnt. Nid ydym ni fel grŵp Plaid Cymru yn credu bod rhinwaith mewn cefnogi y cynnig hwn byddai'n gwneud dim, heblaw creu anrhefn a chost ar adegau pan ddylai'n hecni fod ar gydweithiau i wynebu heriau'r broses gosod cyllideb sydd o'n blaenau. Dylem fod yn canolbwyntio ar sut y gallwn wneud y gorau yn trigolion gyda'r adnoddau cyfyngedig sydd gennym yn hytrach na chwarae gemau gwleidyddol yr ydym yn llawn gredu sydd tu ôl i'r cynnig hwn. Yn gryno ac i gloi felly, ni all, nid yw pob aelod o grŵp Plaid Cymru yn cefnogi'r cynnig hwn heddiw.
Thank you, Gwyneth. You just got past my deadline, but never mind. We'll let you go. Thank you. Before I ask you to speak, Jason, David, your camera, I keep seeing you're on there, but your camera keeps going off. So unless you show your face, I shall take it that you're not present in the meeting. So put your camera on, please, mate. Jason, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this rollout happened on my watch, let's be clear about it. I've fronted up to this. I've conducted press and TV interviews, video through our social media channel, spoke to various journalists, and I'm here today facing a motion of no confidence of this. I accept fully it happened on my watch. I've fronted up to it. I'm on record, rightly, as apologising to all of the members of the public this has affected, and I'll repeat that apology again. I repeat my thanks to members. I'm no different. I have had lots and lots of complaints. I've dealt with them, and I know that members have, and I thank them for that. Thank them for their patience on hard work. And I accept that this is a core service, fundamental service that we provide, the collection of waste, of household rubbish. And on this occasion, for the rollout, we got it wrong. And I'll go over that. I will go over that shortly. I've talked to the chairs and vice chairs group, and as been mentioned by Martin, I've tasked them with undertaking a full report and a full investigation as to the processes. I believe that there'll be another meeting this week following some ambiguity about the decision that was made by that group in July. And they will shortly be presenting the processes to do a full investigation. I'm going to, before I move on to the waste service and what went wrong and the wider issues that have been raised, I think Delith is absolutely right to raise the decisions made by the previous cabinet. And I want to put to bed what's been said today that is totally incorrect, that we inherited a concept, a brief idea of a different collection system. Delith's already done this, but from 2018 to the last cabinet meeting before the election in May 22, there were a number of meetings to decide on the details of the waste model. So we inherited not a concept. That's nonsense. What we inherited was a well-advanced, costed project with a business plan. The routes were planned, the lorries were out on tender, the depot was out on tender. If we had wanted to turn this around, and I know there's members here today, in fairness, new members who aren't bound by other decisions, who don't like the trolley box and say we should have retained the old system. That's a point of view, and that's fair enough, you're entitled to it. But if we'd wanted to do that, we couldn't. It would have cost this council millions. And we would be in an old system that going forward, we'd be behind the curve on climate change and on our waste targets. So I want to put to bed this idea, that there was a concept. There wasn't. We inherited a full case. And I'm bound to say, I'm going to repeat on a theme that Delith has brought up. I've started my submissions today by saying this happened on my watch, by fronting up and showing good leadership, responsibility, and getting us out of this mess. I've heard the opposite from the leader of the opposition and the previous cabinet member. What I've heard is nothing to see here, move on. It was a little idea, it was a concept, nothing. I've manned up, I've faced up, they should as well. They haven't. That's weak leadership. The report, the investigation will go back in time. It will go to the timelines and look at the implications of decisions that have been made. Now, I've avoided saying this in the past. I've avoided saying it because I wanted to show good leadership, to show the public of Denbighshire that we were working really hard to get out of this. Because the public don't want to, you're right, Hugh Hilditch is right. They don't want to see a spat. They don't want to see politicians attributing blame. But here I am, facing a motion of no confidence in my leadership, that it's my fault. Well, at this stage, I'm going to, as the Pandora's box has been opened, I'm going to raise the issues that have been mentioned by myself and Delith as leader of Plaid Cymru about decisions that were made over the years. Going back to Martin's, I'm making no judgment now. Martin's point was let the inquiry take due course, and I'm going to. But I wish we could hear from the opposition, the leader of the opposition and the former lead member, a bit more backbone and responsibility as to where they sit with what went wrong. Okay, what went wrong? Well, clearly there are issues in the way the new service was designed. The routes, I've mentioned the routes, certain assumptions were made, forecasts were made, the number of properties that can be collected an hour, the amount of recycling presented, the capacity of the vehicles. These are all technical things, okay? Technical things, operational matters. Those were decided in the business plan, and the assumptions those assumptions were made when we hit the ground on June the 3rd, they were out. I'll be the first to admit that. Those assumptions did not match the reality on the ground. That resulted in miscollections in week 1 that compounded the problems in the subsequent weeks going forward. I apologise for that again. I apologise at the time. I fronted up. It's called leadership. It was at this stage, at the end of week 1, that we knew that we had a really serious situation. I was in daily meetings with the officers. I'm naming names because we all know who they are, with Tony, with Paul Jackson, with Graham as well, with staff at the depot, with the lead member, HR involved. We got HR involved because one of the issues was around overtime staffing, agency work. It was an all Denbighshire approach. It was all hands to the mill. It was leadership. Now, those additional resources, of course, bring additional costs, and I will return to that in a minute. But we were working flat out at that stage. One of the most difficult meetings I've ever fronted up was the cabinet meeting in June. Yes, the end of June, when I faced, rightly, as I keep saying, it happened on my watch. I rightly faced a number of really, really difficult, challenging questions. I faced angry councillors, and I don't blame them for being angry. I'm expressing some issues about what's been said and done in the past, but I don't blame, because they were getting angry residents. I was as well. But the point I want to make is, I was living and breathing that then. I wasn't sleeping because I care about residents. It was embarrassing on my own road, my own street, that there were bins that weren't collected. But we worked hard and we worked through it. And that is leadership. Now, those additional resources have incurred additional cost. In fairness, the lead member for finance has been challenging our 151 officer at all times to provide regular updates on that. Myself and the lead member and lead member for waste, Barry, have been getting regular updates, and that information has been shared through member briefings. The costs need to be funded. It's a moving feast. It's a complex matter. The inquiry will look at the cost, but you know, I'll front up and I'll be honest that there will clearly be additional costs here. Let me say this as well: throughout that period, when matters were at their worst, I was challenging. Myself and Barry were challenging the officers. We were pushing back on the routes, the redesigns of the routes. As I said, we've got HR in. It was an all council approach that we needed to get us over the line. We worked hard day and night to get this fixed. It's not fixed now. I'll be the first to admit that as well. But I'm going to put some perspective on this. It has improved. It really has improved. Hugh wants to hear from Barry. Well, he'll be hearing from Barry shortly, because I'm going to deal with the other issues around this vote of no confidence. But Barry will be coming in with the plan that we have moving forward as well. I know that Tony's in the room as well. But I want to address a couple of things, and I want to talk about perspective. Okay. I think phrases like vast resources of the council, other staff from other services have been used. Well, again, a bit of perspective on that. In the 8-week period covering July to the end of August, in any given week, there was between 0 and 8 staff from other services working in any 1 week in the waste service. It was hardly ever 8, and the average number of volunteers would have been 3 per day. That's from a pool of thousands of staff, and we didn't pull any frontline staff, of course, because of course that's the right thing to do. Martin's touched on something else I'm going to say as well. Barry's going to outline a way forward. This has been the most challenging thing in my career. People know my background. I was a lawyer. I've been dealing with people whose liberty was at stake, whose children were going to be taken into care. This is by far the most stressful thing I've had to deal with. I'm the leader, and it comes with the territory. And I've shown leadership, and we've made some difficult decisions, and we've moved forward. I've not heard in the last 15 weeks, I think that was the quote, I've not heard once, well, you should have done this. Former member, well, you know, I think this should have happened. There's no plan. I've heard nothing from any of the other groups about how they would have done this differently. Nothing. Still haven't heard anything. Heard one suggestion: stop it. Put a stop on it and get back to the drawing board. Stupid idea. I'll tell you why it's a stupid idea. Let's look at the recent figures for last week. 46,000 households in Ddinbych, 232 failed collections. And I'll repeat what I said early on. If you're one of those 232 and your rubbish is not collected, that's awful and terrible. I've talked about losing sleep, and that's not right. And we need to move on. We need to get it better. But let's put some perspective. 232 out of 46,000. Of those 232, half of them, the trolley box was collected, but the cardboard went. I'm going into granular detail because I need to make this point. So that's 99.94% were collected. Of the 232, all but 28 were collected the next day. The remaining 28 were collected over the weekend. So that's 232 out of 46,000, 99.94% collection rate. That's the direction of travel. That's where we're going. And in the meantime, I've heard no ideas from any other groups about how they would have done this differently, how they would have, on an operational level, made sure that this didn't happen. No ideas. They're bereft of ideas. I'm going to, as I say, with your permission, Chair, when it's appropriate, if you can bring Barry in on the way going forward. I've talked about finances. We will be using reserves There's no getting away from that. But I think we're turning a corner. We are turning a corner, and we're going to get this right. We haven't got it right yet. And I repeat my apology and my thanks to all the members who've worked hard. I'm going to address some of the other issues in relation to the vote of no confidence. And Delith has kind of said a lot of what I wanted to say, but that's fair enough. These challenges around budget decisions are not an attack on my leadership. They are disagreements over difficult budget decisions that I, as leader, have had to make. That's what they are. And if you're not prepared to make those decisions, then you're a weak leader. You're bereft of ideas. People are going to be fed up now. I know you've been told not to moan and groan, but there's going to be some moaning and groaning now when I talk about the irony of the Conservative group having a go at a Labour-led administration for making cuts to public services when, without a shadow of doubt, there's no debate, the Conservative Party, the party they were knocking on doors for weeks on end earlier this year, are the cause of why this council and other councils in Wales and England have no money. It's as simple as that. The irony, I'm amazed. And if the residents, if voters, shall I say, were so dissatisfied with this Labour-led administration, with this Labour-plied coalition, with this Labour council, why did they turn out across the region and return Labour MPs? I'll tell you why. Because the public know who is responsible for funding cuts to local government, the Tories. The people know, the public know who's responsible for cuts to our devolved nations, the Tories. They know who's decimated our public services across the country, the Tories. You're fed up of hearing it, but you're still going to hear it because it's the truth. And it's why we face, in this county and in other councils, an existential threat to the existence of this council. And again, I'm going to quote Hugh Irving. Bear with me. How can things be turned around? There's another way. Is there? I haven't heard it from you. I haven't heard it from the Conservative group. I haven't heard it from the Independents. We have monthly budget reports to Cabinet. Yeah? You can sit and listen to them. You can read the papers. You can ask questions. Room empties. Disappears. Budget workshops should be attended better as well. I'll say that. I don't hear how budgets would be managed differently. All I hear is you can't cut this and you can't cut that. I don't want to cut anything. I didn't come into politics to cut libraries and shut libraries. But that's all I hear. You shouldn't do it. Okay. If we don't make that saving, where does the saving come from? You tell me where the saving comes from. I hear nothing. Absolutely nothing. Do you know why? Because they're bereft of ideas. They have poor leadership, weak leadership, no ideas about budgets. Now, a couple of other things. CYFARFOD. The world's changed. Might have escaped your notice. The working world has changed. We do things differently now. We don't need the cost of running 3 big buildings. For a number of reasons, now's not the time to go into it. CYFARFOD was the building that made more sense to dispose of as a capital asset. That's what's been done. Schools, lucky for you that you were on lead for education at a time the Welsh Labour government was throwing money at this council to build schools, including 2 Welsh medium schools, I'm proud to say. One right next door to where I live, Ysgol y Llys in Prestatyn, and in St Asaph as well. Queen's Market. Yeah, okay. Well, in fairness, Chair, I've had a lot thrown at me. Yes, okay, and I understand I will be. Everyone else 15 minutes. I will be summing up at the end, so I'll conclude because I've had a lot thrown at me. Queen's Market. Not to blame the other cabinet, because the Welsh Government said that we had to build the building before the operator. So that's not to blame the other cabinet, but that's what we inherited. And that's been a real difficulty because those who want to operate have different views on the designs. But obviously it's sensitive, but we're in discussions at the moment, and I'm confident there'll be decisions made on that. I'm a bit disappointed about the Tory press release because, Hugh Irving, you sit on the operational group that makes these decisions, you're aware of these decisions, and you know the difficulties we've had. That leaves a bit of a bitter taste in the mouth, I'm afraid. We've had 39 audit reports in the last 2 years since I've been leader. 39 reports. 30 have received a high assurance, 9 have received a medium assurance, 0 low assurances. That's good governance. That's a reflection of good, strong governance arrangements and good leadership. As I say, I will hand over to Barry on the plans for the operation plans for the bins going forward. I've heard no ideas about how then that they would have done differently. The attacks on me are based on budget decisions, which the other groups aren't brave enough to make. I will be summing up at the end as well. So I've probably said everything I need to say. So I'll sit down, Chair, and let the debate continue.
Thank you very much, Jason. Sorry we have to push, but we have a lot to get through, I imagine. I've had a hand up from Brian Jones, which I'll take first, because all the leaders have spoken now, so I will own it to the floor. Yeah. And I've got a hand up from Brian Jones, and then I'll go to Barry.
Thank you, Chair. If you want to go to the lead member first, and then, because I might have to perhaps do some defending when the lead members spoke, Chair, so I would recommend
let you go first, Brian. He wants you first.
Who does?
The lead member is.
The lead member wants me first. Okay, then I'll try and be as brief as possible. Hopefully, my voice is coming through. Okay, Chair. Yes. You can hear me, all right, Chair?
We can.
You can. Good. Right. I'll just touch on briefly then the comment from the Plaid lead member, and she did talk about facts, and she is correct in the fact that 2018, Brian Jones, born and bred in Sunnyrill, was the lead member for Waste in 2018, and Brian Jones, the lead member for Waste at the time, sat in a cabinet briefing, and a young guy called Tony Ward came in, and he presented us with about 5 options, if I can remember, about this wonderful trolley box system. We sat there as a cabinet, as the then cabinet, and the comment I remember from that day, and Councillor Hugh Hilditch-Roberts will probably bear me out, and the comment was, over our dead bodies, were we going to use the blue, we were going to get rid of our beloved blue bin. And Mr. Ward went away, and then he came back with more RAP information at a meeting shortly after. So from the off, the blue bin was always dear to our hearts, and it's still dear to my heart today. So we went through the process, and the concepts were developed, and a lot of things happened. And again, the leader replied, as quoted meetings and quotes from meetings. And in the early days, I looked at it, scrutinised it. Certainly the point on the rounds and the size of the vehicles, there was lots of conversations about that in the early stages and how that might work, and rural areas, what problems would we get in rural areas, what problems would we have in HMSOs in places like West Rill, and those things were discussed, but it was so far out from when the system would actually go live that it didn't get into massive detail, but it was important, and it was discussed. And we had our dear friends from RHAP who were there as the experts, and Mr. Ward, Mr. Tony Ward, the current corporate director, he certainly knows my views about RHAP from those days, without getting too critical. And so along we plodded, and then whether any of the officers can remember this, but the last cabinet meeting in the last council, the cabinet brief, April 2022, I sat in the cabinet brief Hilditch Roberts will remember this, Councillor Hilditch Roberts, and I said to the Tony Wards and the Graham Bowses of this world, if I was a career politician, I wouldn't be supporting this anymore because it was going down the wrong track. It wasn't the right thing to do. And the worst thing about the whole of this trolley box startup and moving it along the tracks, the worst thing about it was, and this is truth, and it is facts, and if people want to put in freedom of information, so they can find it out that it's right. And I have kept quiet up to now, and I've kept my decorum about being the previous lead member. But the fact of the matter on this trolley box system is that Ddinbych County Council were blackmailed by the Welsh Government to go down this track because they began in 2018 to withdraw funding from Ddinbych County Council to run the waste service. And they did that by cutting what a lot of people won't know, residents and voters, the revenue support grant. They started to cut the revenue support grant that was given to us to run the waste service, and that was the.
I feel I might have to stop you, mate, because I think.
Well, I'll just finish. Yeah, I'll just finish then, and then I've mentioned the last cabinet brief, the last cabinet meeting, April 2022. If somebody wants to trawl that out and go through it, I sat in that meeting, and we had to tick off another couple of £1 million towards this trolley box, which I wasn't happy about. And the biggest criticism that day, the councillor was shouting down the wires to me in the chamber off his computer, was none other than the current lead member, Barry Mellor, and he said words to the effect of, this is totally out of control. And he was the chair of corporate governance at the time. He said, I'm taking this to corporate governance and we're not having this. It's run up to 20 million. What are you doing? And actually, I did quote something like that.
Stop you, mate. Turn you off.
Well, I got lots more to say, Chair. I should be given the opportunity because I have took a lot of criticism in the last, since June the 3rd. Yeah, and I've sat there quietly. I didn't go to the BBC when they wanted me to give an interview. I should be given the opportunity to finish what I'm saying. But anyway.
Thank you. Barry, go on, let you have a go.
I'll come in after everybody else has had a go, please. Yeah, thank you. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not having a go, we're having a debate, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. For the last 15 weeks, chaos and confusion has reigned supreme over the new Ddinbych Waste and Recycling Collection Service. We are all aware how quickly the rollout failed to deliver, and by the middle of June, I had already voiced my concerns with respect to the systemic issues that were causing failures in service delivery within Llangollen and the surrounding rural villages. The leadership of the council, supported by the cabinet, dismissed these as teething problems. Rather than hold DCC leadership to account and demand improvement, the cabinet backed those officers responsible, collectively offered some apologies, donned some PPE, made some videos, ridden the waste lorries on the rounds, and told us all would be well in 12 weeks. The situation only got worse. Collections across the county failed to materialise, and rubbish piled up in residents' bins, driveways, pavements and streets. Meanwhile, they congratulated themselves and their colleagues for the great steps forward, and DCC officers told residents how proud they were of the work done, whilst their head of service chastised councillors for stepping in on the ground with waste teams to help get rubbish collected from our wards. The head of service asked me to refrain from interfering with operational matters. This is a council leadership and cabinet in collective denial at the scale of the problem. 15 weeks on, we still have a system which, albeit marginally improved from the start,
is still failing to consistently deliver a statutory service to the residents in my ward. It has consumed over 500,000 of additional costs, and partial improvements have only been brought about by the addition of extra personnel and vehicles, increased rounds, overtime, and DCC staff being reallocated from their normal duties. All throughout this period, the Cabinet and the Council leadership have, like Nero, simply fiddled and in some cases holidayed whilst Denbighshire's fragile budget is being burnt up on this bonfire of fear. Rather than seek to determine the real systemic failures, they have offered apology after apology, week in, week out, to anyone they can possibly give one to. These apologies are meaningless. The Cabinet leader has admitted apologies don't collect waste, but he still offers them, knowing they are hollow. While some councillors will claim all is well in their wards, I can, hand on heart, say they are not well in Llangollen. As an example, over the weekend, residents who I have helped several times already have come to me again advising of no collections in the past fortnight. Today, I can inform members that I, along with the CEO and the corporate director, received video evidence from my ward of operatives simply dumping segregated batteries in a resident's hedge, which has happened in the last fortnight. Recently, we have also seen video footage doing the rounds on social media platforms of operatives commingling segregated waste while standing on the top of a cab roof, throwing it into a caged vehicle. There have also been reports of other health and safety issues, and all this taking place despite officers telling us that extensive training had been undertaken. New cases arrive and closed cases reopen. It's a perpetual pattern, and for the last 15 weeks, my life has been consumed by this issue. Officers never appear to have control of this project, and they are still struggling to get into a steady state. They have resorted to obfuscation, hand-wringing, meaningless apologies, numerous short-lived initiatives, and constant denial of the true scale of the problems. The Cabinet, under the current leadership, is failing to demonstrate its control over DCC officers to rectify the situation. It is weakly led and unwilling to act decisively to demand more accountability and responsibility, and to accept this system was not fit for purpose. The lead member for waste and recycling and the leader have to accept responsibility for this failure. Getting back to the basics though, as we sit here now in this chamber, waste remains uncollected. The rollout of additional programs such as AHP are stalled because the system cannot cope with any more demand. And every week, more overspend is happening. Control of the scheme has failed. Fresh initiatives by DCC officers to regain control are short-lived. Root causes of failure remain unknown, and control of the budget has been completely lost. The original estimated cost saving of 500,000 per annum has been consumed, and it continues to cost 55 to 60,000 per week more than planned, which equates to approximately £3 million per annum. That is the stark reality we are now facing. The evidence of failure is overwhelming, undisputable, and ultimately, no doubt, it will be the residents that will be expected to pick up the tab for what is a complete failure in the planning and implementation of this scheme, and that is totally unacceptable. Consequently, I have no confidence that any Cabinet member or any of the leadership team responsible for this disaster can provide the assurance needed today that there is an end in sight, a fit-for-purpose recovery plan in place, and when the additional costs, which are deeply damaging to the county's budget, will cease. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen. I'll call on Bobby now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we've heard an awful lot today, and unfortunately, some of it is going to be repeated. It's really hard not to. It's really hard not to, because everybody's, you know, coming from the same thing. Standing before you today to support this vote of no confidence is probably the hardest moment that I've had since my life in local politics began, which is actually more than 30 years ago. I was invited into the independent group in 2008 when I was elected to the council as the only Lib Dem. I have enjoyed being a member of this non-political group for 16 years, and I know how long and how hard we have all thought before submitting this vote of no confidence in the leader and the cabinet. When a vote of no confidence was suggested, I reflected on the past 2 years or so. It has certainly been a rocky road, and that's been very difficult for a brand new cabinet to deal with. But I can honestly say 2 years and 4 months into this council term, I feel confident that this leader and this cabinet, I do not feel confident that this leader and this cabinet can step up to the plate and lead us into a more stable situation. I'm sad to say, because obviously I've been on the council a long time, but this is why I added my name to the vote. Although this vote relates to the new system rollout, it is not all about the bins, the reason I've come to my conclusion. In the early months of this administration, despite intensive questioning from some members, this cabinet proposed that the council should vote for a council tax rise of 3.6%, the lowest or almost the lowest in Wales. 4 months later, in a budget workshop, the leader gave an intensely emotional speech, telling us the council was in danger of going bankrupt. He described our financial situation as challenging, enormous, a severe problem. He advised drastic action, cuts across all services, and increasing council tax in 23-24 by 250% was on the cards. The council tax rise was 9.3%, with a £3 million funding gap, with an unidentified way of putting that right. This was and is unprecedented. Over the last year, we have cut library opening hours by 40%, cut staff through a voluntary redundancy scheme. The head of licensing, which I chair, has retired, leaving that very limited workforce to fill the breach with no more money. And that's just one example. And it seems toilet closures might be the next in line for cut. In a report to Cabinet in June 24, there was a corporate plan performance update, which accompanied the council's performance self-assessment. Despite the corporate plan themes being cut from 9 down to 6, we are failing to meet most of those trimmed down targets, and 5 out of 6 are experiencing obstacles. 1 is acceptable. On the greener Ddinbych theme, we will not meet our 2030 goal of net zero. That report alludes to the key project for our green agenda being the introduction of the new recycling system to meet Welsh Government 70% target. Initially, we were told, and I was there, it would cost 8 to 9 million and save £500 per annum and improve our carbon emissions. And as Delith said over and over again, that is fact. At the Cabinet meeting in June, when I questioned the problems re the new waste system rollout, which were already emerging, the report author firmly pointed out to me that the waste service was a tiny fraction of what the council do. Well, that may well be, but it affects every single one of our residents. We have had 15,000 complaints and it's rising. It's a record. In excess of 22 million has been spent, plus 500,000, and that was on August the 4th, so far in trying to get the situation right. We will not save any money or become carbon neutral, as far as I can see. The rollout has been an absolute disaster, a fiasco of mammoth proportions. Our reputation in Ddinbyshire is in tatters. Yes, we have made progress since June the 4th, but only yesterday I had a call from a fiercely independent 89-year-old lady determined to stay in her own home. She doesn't have social care, but she does need assistance with her garden waste, which she paid for in advance. No one has collected since the 27th of June. She said to me, she is at the end of her tether. This is a shameful state of affairs, the worst debacle since I have represented Ruthin on Ddinbych Council for more than 20 years. No wonder this vote of no confidence has been brought forward. If it's not voted for, and we can all do the sums, Delith, Martin, Jason have said their groups will all vote for the status quo, I predict this council will continue to fail and probably end up in special measures. Finally, and this is probably for you, Barry, I bumped into an ex-councillor a couple of weeks ago, a former lead member for Highways and Environment, and in despair, I asked him what he would do in this situation. Without any hesitation, he said, I would never have let it get to this. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Bobby. Cheers. Terry Mendes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And you'll be glad to know that I'll be a lot more succinct and short than my predecessors. I support this motion, and I thank the independent group for bringing this before council. Now, the motion focuses on the bin fiasco, the chaos, the shambles, and can I add incompetence to those adjectives? But it's not all about, as contrary to what Councillor Hogg said, it's not just the bin rollout that we're discussing here, but that is the catalyst of this motion. So, Martin, I'm not sure whether you listened to Councillor Hilditch, but he did bring in other subjects. There are other failings to this leadership and this cabinet. And let me give you some facts. Delith loves her facts, so let me give you some other failings. Sorry, the first fact is I am the only member in this chamber that's been out with my trailer and picked up rubbish. Okay. But one of the other failings is that I've reported the same addresses 4 times and they still haven't gone on the system with photographs, with names and addresses, etc., etc. But let's look at these other failings. Let's look at the other facts. Okay, a budget has gone up 14%. Sorry, the 14% tax rise since this cabinet took the reins 2 years ago, and the services have deteriorated. We're looking at a 25 million black hole next year and possibly the year after. So already a 10% rate rise has been mooted for next year and possibly the year after. The white elephant, that is the Queen's Market. It's been mentioned, it'll probably be mentioned again, but 23 million on an empty building that can't attract an operator and has no tenants. Members, let me assure you, you can buy a house off a plan these days, so you don't have to wait for something to be built before you get tenants. Libraries were closed. Sorry, I must partially closed. I know you don't like that. They were closed to save 300,000. Well, that's the first 6 weeks of this rollout. Okay, so at 50,000 extra per week. Public toilets has been mooted to be closed to save 300,000. Well, that's the second 6 weeks of this rollout. Planning breaches. Okay, there are 561 planning breaches in this county which are not being addressed, and the council is losing revenue by not collecting tax, and the cost of rectifying these breaches is soaring week on week, and I've been banging on about that for about 2 years. What also was alluded to by Councillor Hilditch, that there's about 150 planning applications in the backlog due to the IT failure. Members in this chamber were elected to represent their residents, to do the best for the community, and that should be reflected in the vote, not along party political lines. And I'd just like to finish. I told you I was going to be short. Let me remind the members that Einstein's definition of madness is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. We need change.
Thank you, Terry. Hugh?
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. Just want to correct Martin Hogg as chair of the scrutiny panel. I put a proposal forward in the chairs and vice chair for an independent run scrutiny, not an inquiry. We do not have the power within Denbighshire. It's UK government and Welsh government can call an inquiry, so there is no inquiry. The terms of reference will be delivered to Gary Williams on the 16th of September, where Gary Williams is requested to go away and cost it out. That's what was agreed. Thank you.
I remember that. Pauline Edwards?
Thank you, Chair. You'll be pleased to know that I do not say the word bin or waste at all in the next 4 minutes. When I was elected to serve as county councillor for my ward in 2022, I was filled with hope and anticipation for the work that would be accomplished for the benefit of Denbighshire and the residents of my ward. With 48 enthusiastic councillors, I envisaged a collaboration and unity, all directed towards the common goal of enhancing our communities. Sadly, that vision didn't materialise. Upon the formation of the cabinet, composed of 9 members, I anticipated leadership grounded in experience. However, what I was surprised to see was that 4 of these councillors were newly elected and another had only 6 months previous experience. In stark contrast, my fellow independent members had a wealth of experience and knowledge, such as the former leader with a total of 15 years of experience, along with 3 other former cabinet members. Yet that wealth of knowledge seemed irrelevant to the current cabinet, who believed they could manage Denbighshire without tapping into the expertise surrounding them. From the very few months within the council, I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation from the cabinet. It became increasingly evident that decisions were being made without the input of a broad spectrum of councillors, particularly those from other political parties and significantly from the independent group. This lack of inclusive decision-making has been both disheartening and, quite frankly, unacceptable. During a briefing last year, the Chief Executive described the governance structure as cabinet-led. The implication was plain. Decisions were being made by the 9 cabinet members, resulting in the marginalisation of the remaining 39 councillors. This is not just astonishing, but it was a wake-up call to the potential dangers of such a leadership model. I was particularly shocked and saddened last October we learned the drastic reduction of library opening hours. This controversial decision was made without involving the majority of county councillors in the discussions. It was unthinkable that I, along with my colleagues, had no prior knowledge of this plan until it was revealed in the press, all the while having been discussed by the Cabinet for months. Regrettably, this was not an isolated incident, and we witnessed similar occurrences regarding the car parks and the closing of public toilets. My attempts to voice concerns during Cabinet meetings were met with frustration. It was disheartening to hear the leaders shut down discussions prematurely, dismissing our input with phrases like, "the clock is ticking," and time is moving on. It felt as if our perspectives were merely an inconvenience rather than valuable insights into our community's needs. At the Governance and Audit Committee meeting in January 2024, a request was made to stress test the Council's budget processes, particularly in light of recent financial challenges. This looked at lessons learned from 3 authorities in England who had been issued with Section 114 notices within the last 5 years. When this stress test assessed leadership, it concluded the following. There must be recognition that some senior officers and the Cabinet are relatively new to their roles, and this represents an element of risk in the Council's ability to set future balanced budgets. I would suggest that that risk has now materialised. We find ourselves in a precarious financial position. Denbighshire is in a black hole that threatens the very fabric of our services and communities. And so it is imperative that I voice my belief. The current Cabinet is not capable of effectively managing our Council. They've shown a dangerous combination of overconfidence and inexperience, leading to a perilous position for our residents. In conclusion, I stand before you today to express my deep concern. We need leadership that's inclusive, experienced, and above all committed to engaging with all councillors for the good of our communities, utilising the wealth of knowledge that is present in the Chamber today. I believe this Cabinet is not capable of effectively managing our Council. The time for change is now for the sake of Denbighshire and its residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Hugh Evans.
Thank you, Chair. And just before I start what I was going to say, just respond to the Leader of Plaid Cymru, just to thank her for taking us through the journey in the previous Cabinet, but that was 2.5 years ago now. And just to remind everyone that the lead member's role is a strategy and to plan forward. It's the officers and the lead member's role then to make it happen and make it work. And that's what's not quite happened. But I do look forward to seeing what Barry's got to say in terms of how we move forward from where we are at today. So I have to say this is a really sad day. I find it was one of the worst nightmares as leader that your colleagues and the people that you work with put a vote of no confidence in. That's a terrible thing, and that's none of us want to be here. We do not want to be here, and we are part of Denbighshire. But we are concerned and we are disappointed with what's happening, and listening to the debate, there's frustration, isn't there? And I suspect that the catalyst for why we are here today and why the independents put the motion forward was the council briefing and the feedback. I didn't attend, but the feedback from my colleagues was that there is no leadership, there is no ownership, there is no light at the end of the tunnel, and there are escalating costs. That's what they got from the council briefing, and that's what we've been discussing after that. We've all had to deal with issues and awards, every single one of us. That to a certain extent is our roles. But the worst thing for me is vulnerable people on assisted collection, time and time again, ringing me. They have been really upset. And despite officers' best intentions, we still haven't been able to deal with those issues. And also the other thing is lack of communication and clarity to residents when I'm trying to explain to them and I don't even know myself, and it's really difficult. So it's not working. However, the context and the background, I have to say, is more concerning. And the challenge on our finances, compounded by the budget setting this year, plus the overspend now on the recycling, does cause me significant concern. The overspend on the budget, the call on reserves, the impact on our residents is really serious stuff. And we have been forewarned by the lead member and the 151 officer that our financial position is precarious, to say the least. The easy thing is to complain and question Jason, what Jason has done. It's not easy, right? And I have held back, and I've not being involved in committees and everything, because it is not fair for a previous leader to be challenging, undermining, questioning the new leader. It's a new start, new way of doing things, but you want change to be for the better. But the one thing that said that has stuck in my mind, I'm going to be honest today, is Jason, when you made the statement about 12 months ago that Denbighshire could go bankrupt, okay, and the Westminster is to blame, whatever, whoever is to blame, that caused raised eyebrows in my patch amongst my community. And that has caused residents to worry about our position as an authority. Can we deal with the challenges that lay ahead? Will people get the services that they expect and deserve? And I can understand why you would say that to a certain extent, because the finances are a lot worse than I had to deal with. But that said, we've got to manage with them. The knock-on effect of that statement is, though, that our reputation as an authority is really slipping backwards. And the worst thing, that our credibility as councillors is coming to question. And a lot of the residents now have no confidence that the leadership can deal with the challenges, and they are significant. There's no doubt about that. They can deal with the challenges that they face. But now as a backbencher, and I have to tell you, it's a lot easier being a backbencher than in Jason's role. My residents come first. And I'm relying now on the leadership of the council to deliver good service. And let's be clear today, there are good services in Denbighshire. There are good officers. There are good members. And Denbighshire is struggling, and we may as well be honest. I can't do politics. I know this is a political arena. I'm not here for the politics. But if we do continue like this, given what we were told when the budget was set, given that the pressures that we face, we will be fighting not to be in special measures. Now that is significant, and that is very, very concerning, that all decisions are taken out of our hands. We are accountable to people who haven't got Denbighshire in their hearts. They're just doing the job. And we're going to have to do something which is pretty drastic to stop us going down that journey. So I do have some suggestions, and I'm trying to be constructive. I'm not here to have a go, as I said. Some of the suggestions are quite radical, and some of them need revisiting. But for me, the first, I do have a question, is why are we funding services for inflation and pay, and then asking them to give it back in a programme of savings that we have to fund? The heads of service really need to deliver on budget. If we could turn that around, I think there are savings there that we could be made. You probably have been looking at that. I'm not sure if you have. The corporate plan, that's our manifesto as an authority. That's what we all signed up for. That's what it's struggling. It's not high in revenue cost. I think the corporate plan now needs to be service priorities. If we are that in such a bad state, we need to be protecting our services and the priorities within those services, and we need to prioritise what's important and what's not. We need to look after the vulnerable, and we need to look after people who are educated. That to me is a no-go. I think Jason's on the same wavelength. We need to be doing that as a matter of urgency. I hope, Barry, when you give us the way forward on the recycling, could I suggest that you consider that we have a task and finish group? We are not going to get this done waiting for reports months down the line. They're just going to tell us what we know in months, and we'll have sorted it by then. We need to sort this now. I'm sure there are willing members prepared to support people to be in a task and finish group from all political groups to make this a better service and to work on it. I sense there are people working in isolation, and people are afraid to say what's really happening. If we could come up with a plan within a few weeks or a month, I think that's progress in itself. Yes, we accelerate the asset disposal. I'm sure you are looking a lot of this, and we need to communicate our intentions, because the residents are losing patience with us, but they are losing confidence in us as well. And there's a lot more things we can do, but we need to get into a conversation that value for money is key and protection of services is key, and we cannot expect our residents to bail us out. There are only a few suggestions. I'm sure you're looking at them anyway, but that's on the back of what our lead member and 151 officer are telling us about the state of play. If we don't do some of these, I don't believe that transformation, collaboration, and offloading services is going to deal with the budget pressures. I think we do need a cultural change where challenge is comfortable and support is expected. Failure on these, I think, will lead to an empire without a purpose. And another possibility that Jason or whoever wins this today, we think we know what the numbers are looking like, they need to embrace change, but set also an example. And it's a small example to set, but it does filter down to the organisation. Do we really need a cabinet of 9? Could we do the same thing with a cabinet of 8? It's not a massive saving, but it's the message to officers that we are playing our part in trying to work more efficiently and more effectively. I think that we are now simply, there are far too many priorities in the organisation. Everything seems to be a priority. We really have to have a conversation about what is the real priority, what is the bread and butter stuff, because we are putting pressures on our finances, which we cannot deliver. We need to revisit, relook, and really change our thinking about what we want Denbighshire to be. And because of what's happened, yes, the recycling hasn't worked, but because of the bigger picture, and because of the pressures, and because of the points which the group leaders raised, that's why I'm supporting the motion, and we need to do it, and the choice is pretty clear. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I've let Hugh run over my allotted time in my head because of being previous leader of the council, so I only felt it was fair. Justine Edwards. Is it Justine Edwards? Evans. Bloody hell, am I writing? Sorry. I was as well. Sorry.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Chair,
Justine.
and I'll forgive you for getting my name wrong. I was elected to represent the people of Rhyl, and sadly the people of Rhyl are not happy. They're not happy with this council, and I've never seen public dissatisfaction with the local authority at the level it currently is in Rhyl, and it is becoming increasingly difficult to defend some of the decisions being made by those in charge. I won't go over points that have already been made, but I will, it'd be remiss of me not to mention the millions that were spent on the Queen's Market. Yet over 2 years on from its completion, the building remains empty. 2 summers of trading have been lost, and instead of being the major attraction it was billed as, it is just another lost opportunity on the promenade. We've seen market projects in Chester and Crewe thrive, and people are questioning why our council is failing to get ours up and running. This project has the potential to kickstart Rhyl's regeneration, but we have seen no progress since the appointed operator pulled out last year. As councillors, we're all facing difficult questions from our residents. In my own ward in Rhyl East, for example, people want to know why, at a time when the council were announcing cuts to many services, including libraries and education, approximately 100,000 was spent on my Semlin before a planning application had even been submitted, and then months before the scheme was eventually abandoned. Therefore, as a representative of the people of this town, I feel I have no option but to back this motion put forward this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Justine Evans. Sorry. Mark Young.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So, it's been mentioned decisions of the past cabinet, and I was on that cabinet, and I supported it because we can't ignore the need to sort out our recycling. We can't keep burying it. My wife's involved in the works in the ocean and seas and the amount of plastic there. So we fully agree with that. It was great. It was in Ddinbych. It created jobs. Some fantastic companies were able to work with us to increase their jobs. So it created jobs, saved hundreds of jobs. And the great companies, D. Jones, Lockstock, Henkel Bakery, other brands all available, but they worked with us fantastically. And we should all be brave and proud in this decision and process. But at what cost? And even though I support it, I need to talk about the cost, because I've had a lovely visit of the audit committee with my job in chair of governors, which is right and proper being challenged on the budget. And the chief executive said to me many times, every penny we save is one we don't have to cut or find. But if you turn that round, every overspend has an impact. So as a school, to work for months and months to save hundreds of thousands, to look at jobs, etc., to save money and then to watch an overspend, it hurts. So I will say that, and it's not good enough, and we need to sort it. And with my other hat on in audit and governance, I'll be pushing. We can't keep overspending. Yes, we have reserves, but they're not, they're not bottomless. So although I support it, I'm going to really push to make sure, and we should all be doing this, to make sure what is the new budget. I'm going to touch on that, because it's clearly the new budget's not enough, and we've got Tony there, and I know you want to do your best, but it doesn't feel that we even know. For me, you might change your mind later, what is the cost? And when money's tight, you've got social services, you've got the schools being pushed for savings. If this ends up carrying on, all them services being asked for cuts, it's going to be even worse for them, because we're going to have a balanced budget. That's going to be really, really difficult. And I hope we all work together to make sure we put pressure on. We can't just keep overspending. So it can't be at any cost. So I hope you're going to touch on that. What is the final cost? I am really worried about the cost, and I hope we can sort that. We've had a good debate today, but we can't pretend it's all okay. It's a really worry, especially for schools. We've got homelessness as a huge pressure. So all the comments are valid, but I want to focus on the overspend and when are we going to have the budget needed to deliver this service. So I'm happy to support the request for better recycling. We should all agree with that. But what's the cost? Because it does have an impact on services, especially those which are really, really struggling. And I'll touch on schools. They've been asked for 3 million. About half of them, it looks like we're going to overspend by $500,000. We're being put under pressure by audit, which is right, but we're watching a weekly increase in an overspend. There's an impact on that, and we need to get on top of it, Chief Exec, Leader and Lead Member. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark.
Mervyn Parry, and I've got a couple more left, and then I might just call it a day, because it's getting near midday and people get hungry, especially me.
Chair and members, as we get ready for the agenda 3 today, which is what we're on, to vote on today's motion, the vote of no confidence against the Leader and Cabinet, I encourage all members to think carefully about what their vote might mean. Our democracy relies on transparency, accountability and public trust. Although the Constitution allows Cabinet members to vote, it's important to keep in mind what our constituents expect from us and the standards we should uphold. This vote is more than just formality. It reflects the trust that both the Council and the public have in the Cabinet's ability to lead. As you cast your vote, think about how it might affect public perception and whether it aligns with our ethical standards. I urge you to uphold the values of openness and integrity that represent our Council. If you believe your vote could affect the fairness of this decision, I respectfully suggest you declare an interest now or abstain from voting. Our goal should be to maintain the integrity of our governance and honour the voices of those we serve. That's me done there. And can I also ask if today's vote could be a recorded vote, please?
Yeah, Mervyn. I think we need a seconder for a.
So I can.
Gary, that's your role.
I'll
Sorry.
deal with the recorded vote first. You just need 1/6 of the members present to indicate they'd like a recorded vote. So even on my maths, that's 8. So that's more than 8.
More than 8.
In terms of interests, all members are entitled to vote in this debate. none of the members, whether they be on cabinet or not, would be regarded as having a personal or prejudicial interest under the terms of the Code of Conduct. So members are entitled to vote for themselves if they are to be elected to a chair of a committee or chair of the council. So all members in the chamber are entitled to vote, and those online, sorry.
I forgot I'm not the monitoring officer as well, so I'll let you do that one. Thank you. Julie Matthews.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. There's been a couple of comments about the corporate plan this morning, so I just wanted to clarify. The corporate plan wasn't cut, it was revised, and what actually happened was pledges were lost, no pledges were lost or removed. They were moved down to service level and will still be acted upon. I just want to stress we did have a members' workshop regarding the revised plan. We did have a meeting with group leaders to explain the changes. So the point was, it was all about the financial environment that we live in. We recognised there was a need to revise, to reduce the administration burden, release capacity to support the transformational agenda with officers. That's what we needed to do. Hugh, you mentioned that perhaps we need to change our priorities. You know, I'm with you on that. If that's what's needed, if we need to do another revision, I'm more than happy to have a look at that, and let's, you know, get things moving for the council. I know people have concerns about what we're doing moving forward. That does need to be addressed. We are meant to be one council, and it doesn't feel like it. It never felt like that to me the minute I walked in this room 2.5 years ago. Let's try and change it, turn things round and work together. Thank you. Deal.
Thank you, Julie. You've luckily just come back on screen, David. So go on, you've got your hand up. Mute, probably. Yeah. You're on mute, David. I can't hear a thing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
okay.
thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I've got a question for Jason, which I'd like him to answer honestly. I'm sure he will. Jason, when you formed your cabinet in 2022, was there any reason that you chose not to include some members who had years of experience?
Okay, can I answer that?
Yeah, you answer it quickly,
Yeah,
yes,
so,
and then that
well,
we'll
I'll be
leave
as quick
it
as I
there.
can. Yeah, so I wasn't the first to do that because Brian, who's on the screen there, was picked to be a cabinet member when he had no
No,
experience.
Jason, I'm asking you, not what happened previously.
What,
why did you choose, please?
I will come to that, David. I'll come to that. But
Well, let's come to it now. That was the question, Jason.
I will answer this question how I see fit. So
Yes.
you write down and listen to my answer.
Yes.
Right. I'm not the only one who's done that. Brian Jones was appointed when he was first a councillor. Richard Mannion was appointed when he was first a councillor.
Mr. Chairman, I asked a question.
I will turn you off because I can do that. Mute you.
And Tony Thomas was, and Tony had a baptism of fire over the gypsy sign. I was working with him when I worked for Welsh Government on that, so I think he did a good job. No, my selection of cabinet was based on the democratic principles of the outcome of the election of May 2022, when Labour was the largest group, was the most successful group in the May 2022 elections, and our political aspirations tied and remain tied very close to the Plaid Cymru group. So there were some detailed discussions about the Plaid and Labour group forming a coalition, and we did that, and I picked cabinet members from that team, talented cabinet members with a mixture of a wealth of life experience, the enthusiasm of youth, and many other qualities. So I apologise, David, if I went round the houses to answer the question and put into context that picking councillors who are new to cabinet is not a bad thing and is a done thing. But I felt that was important. So I hope that answers your question. If I was to be succinct, I would say that the cabinet reflects what people voted for in May 2022. It's called democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you, David. Chris Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Just something that we've spoken about what's happening and how it's gone. What we're missing here is public money. So when we're out walking around the wards, you can come over to my ward anytime, but you can't go over Llanwick Bridge because it's still not built. But we have to face these residents that are not having their bins collected, that are seeing the problems in Rill, that the place is a mess and there's no street cleaners or hardly any. What we have to bear in mind, we're all elected here for the resident, not for party political gain. I brought this up a few months ago when we set the budget and then precedented times. We need to leave what Westminster is doing, what the Senate is doing it, and doing it for the Ddinbych residents. Just going over what Jason said there, we are, whatever we put it, an authority or anything like that, we are a business. And yes, Jason, you did say things had changed in the last 2 years. In a business, that would be looked upon. A person with business acumen would say to Westminster, to the Senate, we are stopping this, putting it on hold. If as a business, which we are, we have money off residents, it's public money. If as a business leader, you're happy to splurge 55 to 60,000 pound a week, not a month, not a year, 60,000 pound a week is ludicrous. How many hospitals could that go towards? How many schools could that go towards? In the end, we will have residents in our Ddinbych county not be able to put food in the recycling bins because they are going broke. We need to look at what we're doing for the residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Hugh Irving.
Slightly different tack, Chairman.
Ooh.
You said at the beginning of this debate that you wanted a calm, reasoned debate. You didn't want political points. You didn't want personal attacks. I've been in local government for 50 years since I first won my first election. And I've been subject this morning to the most vicious personal attack I ever have done. And I don't think that behoves the leader well. I really think he should think about withdrawing his personal use of my name and attacking me. I did not mention Queen's Market anywhere in my address. It was one point. I made a few general points on finance, and yet I felt I was quite upset, and I've got to say it after all these years, and it saddens me. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. I think Jason wants to just respond to that
I'll
quickly.
come back in on that one, Hugh. I read at length the detailed press release that your group put out last week with comments from the MS, the ex-former James Davis, ex-MP, and all of the Tory group. Not Peter. Okay, thank you, Peter. And do you know what? I've got a thick skin. Politics. I'll take it. I'm taking today, dealing with today. I'm showing some leadership today. And in the heat of a debate that's about my leadership, which you have instigated and said some quite awful things about me in that press release. And I'm sorry if this sounds disrespectful, Hugh, but I can't think of any other phrase to say it. If you can't take it, don't dish it out.
Thank you, Jason. Last one on my list before Barry, Andrew Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to bring this back to the residents
the residents who elected me. I'm a Prestatyn East Ward councillor. I'm a signatory to this motion because, quite frankly, 2.5 years into this term, we have only seen things go from bad to worse. And quite frankly, my residents just feel that enough is enough. Prestatyn's residents deserve better. We've suffered as we've lurched from one poor cabinet decision to another, and under a leadership and management of the biggest operational change this council has ever seen, i.e. the bins. The accumulation of these hugely negatively impactful decisions along the way have culminated in this today. In short, we really have no alternative other than to put a stop to this downward spiral we are in before it's too late. Our residents have been hit hard this last 2 years with one thing after another that I am very sure could have been so different if only this cabinet would have let us in on their decision-making process, allowed us to effectively and meaningfully engaged and contributed, instead of telling us after the event, knowing there was no intention of changing their minds, whatever we might say. I supported and fought hard for Prestatyn's residents in their fight against our library closing on any day, but nevertheless, the decision was made to close it 40% of its time. I know the majority of our residents in Prestatyn, in my ward, expressed their belief that we have more than one road in our town that should have stayed at 30 miles per hour. This cabinet was having none of it. Then I vehemently challenged the unfathomable decision to charge up until 11 p.m. in our car parks. No use, that fell on deaf ears too. Then came the bins. The unmitigated disaster that for me was the straw that broke the camel's back. Prestatyn has fared badly. In the director's own words over the last few weeks, Prestatyn is the place we've struggled more than anywhere else. It's been another bad day in Prestatyn. Thursday in Prestatyn continues to present us with problems. In fact, over the last 7, weeks, the collections in Prestatyn have gone to plan on just 2 days. I do challenge the 232 uncollected bins figure. I'd be extremely interested to hear how that was arrived at. I have cried for and with residents in my ward in their plight to achieve the very basic of statutory service, to have their bins emptied. How can that ever be acceptable? What finished it for me on that one was at the 12-week briefing when I asked these questions. When will we stop having recycled waste chucked into a cage lorry? When will residents be able to apply for a second trolley bot as families are struggling with just the one? When will all the remaining surplus bins be uplifted that are littering our streets and causing obstacles everywhere? When will compensation to subscribers of the green bin waste hear what the plan is for them to be compensated when they had failed collections? And ultimately, when will this end? When will this bin system be working? The officers had no answers to any of those specific questions. And shockingly, the lead member never spoke a word. To top it all, my town, Prestatyn, it's looking untidy and unkempt like never before. Cuts have been made at the very heart of the teams charged with keeping us looking clean and tidy, our road markings clear, our beautiful grassed areas and trees properly maintained. They can't do that. They're thwarted. We've passed the point of no return, unfortunately, with this issue. With this leadership, it's time to change, to give us a fighting chance of getting back on track. I will vote, as so many of my ward residents expect me to, on their behalf, and that is to support this motion. Thank you.
Barry, last one.
Yes,
Oh,
thank
well,
you, Chair.
I didn't see you, sorry. I shall come to you anyway. Yeah.
Is it worth doing Dallas before?
Dallas, do you want Dallas to go before you,
Okay,
Barry? And then,
yeah.
then you've got to be the last one. Yeah, sorry.
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for allowing me to speak and I appreciate that it's difficult for you to keep an eye
Get
on
me on
it at the
everybody.
same time, but that's fine. Just a few points that have been raised by different people that I'd like to have some clarification around them if I could, and I might be coming to offices with some of these points if that's okay. It's just I think it's important that, as I said in my little talk, facts are important, I think, aren't they? And being able to understand what's behind those is really important. So I thank everybody for the debate as well, and it's been very, I held it in a respectful way, and I thank everyone for doing that. I think that's really important. Just a few of the points. There's been points that have been raised about the progress that's been made over time with the collections, whereas we were having a significant amount at the beginning, and that it's been a question mark has been put around that data of 232. So I'd like to ask Tony, maybe if you could sort of clarify a little bit of the progress over the time and the data over the time period, so that we've got the correct information in front of us. I've heard behind me from Councillor Telly Mendes about the 25 million black hole in front of us. Well, yes, there is a significant deficit that we're facing again, something that I alluded to, that we need to work together to come up with the solutions that we've now heard, some of them coming from Councillor Hugh Evans, and I thank him for them. We need to do that within the process that we had, and the same that we had last year. We didn't have that many ideas coming forward that were credible and that we could work on. There have been some allusions about the cabinets making decisions without no opportunity for members to participate. What I'd say with that is cabinet meetings are open to all members on every single month, so everyone can go there and put their points of view across for cabinets to take those into consideration. So, just to clarify and to make sure that that's correct. There was alludance, I'm going to Liz now, about the budget. We've heard about the council tax setting, and over the last 2 years, there was a suggestion about the 3.6% that was done. And what I'd like clarification about is it reasonable, or is it something that you would deem as good governance to raise far higher council tax than would be necessary for that year, and therefore put an additional pressure on our residents at a time when is that good governance, is that a good way of running our budgets to do that? Also, we've had alluding towards the 3 million black hole that we had to complete the budget last year, where we did have a plan, but it wasn't completed, but we did have a plan and all members were given that information. It's been said that that's now coming back to roost. I would dispute that. From what I understand, that those 3 million that were on the table had been transferred. So could you go through that with us as well, Liz, if you would? And one final thing is about the libraries. I've heard several members saying closing the libraries. I'd like to just make it completely clear that closing of libraries was never on the table. And I know Councillor Wynne worked really hard on that point with officers, and that he was looking at what we had to do about closing those, so that we would keep them in all areas. There was a point made about what I'd like to also put on record is that members were given 24 hours notice about the consultation and the public consultation that would be before it went out to the public. So just to clarify that point as well. I think that's it. Those are the main points I had to make.
Thank you. I don't really want.
My concern there, Chair, is there's lots of questions, all good questions in their own right, some of which have kind of been broadly covered in the discussion. My worry is, I think if we go through a process of answering all those questions, I suspect lots more hands will come up to come back on further points. So while I think they're valid questions, I do think they're broadly been covered. I do think some of the issues around specific questions about budget, council tax setting, etc., we can probably deal with another time in one of our very many budget workshops that we've got planned. I'm just conscious that
if we get officers up to start answering those questions, more hands are going to be going 2.25 hours, over 2 hours. It's probably worth trying to draw it to a conclusion, because I suspect you're all kind of now understand where you sit, and that would be my view, Chair. I don't want to delay debate and discussion, but I think we've had a fair crack at it.
Yeah, I was whispering the same to my monitoring officer on my right-hand side, and we've come to the same agreement that we don't want to go further. Now, Brian, I can see your hand up. Now, I'm trying to get to Barry Mellett. No, quickly, you've got a minute, and then you're off.
Right, hang on, before you start the clock, can I ask Mr. Mellett, Councillor Mellett, to go first, please? My name's been mentioned in this debate quite a bit. I'd rather that Councillor Mellett went first, please.
So you know,
Councillor Mellett was next on the list. Councillor Mellett should go next. Let's not stifle the running order of democracy. Come on.
If I can, sorry, Gary, you're going to come in. Go on, Gary, you're monitoring officer. You're better at this than me. Thank you.
My advice is that the chair manages the meeting, and it's for the chair to determine who's called and in what order.
Yeah, Ryan, I had you next.
You got me next. All right, then. Here we go. I did check the constitution. I did have 5 minutes. I got cut short last time, which someone from the media's picked up on that. So here we go then, very briefly. We talked about, Julie Matthews mentioned about collaboration, working together. I put forward a plan for the Queen's Market, and it got chucked in the bin. Yeah. Easy in, easy out Queen's Market option for this summer with no lengthy ties. It was a credible offer, and it got put in the bin. No collaboration. Very quickly, I've probably got 30 seconds. Before you vote this morning, members, remember I was on the cabinet last time. Through the propaganda machine and other factors, I lost by 200 votes. There's a lot of residents out there that are not interested in a lot of this debate this morning. All we want to see is potholes, antisocial behaviour, clean and tidy, done properly. If you don't vote with this motion, you won't be getting re-elected in May when it comes along in 2027. So please think about that before you vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brian. I didn't want that kind of a... Never mind. Here we go. Barry, you're going to be last, and then that's it, mate.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first start by thanking Hugh? I want to thank Hugh for coming up with some solutions. I'll certainly take forward looking at the task and finish group. He's the only person out of 49 of us who's come up with any solutions. Anyway, let's go on to the service. We all know, we've all heard, it's not been the perfect rollout. And when you're looking at 40,000, 47,000 households, I don't think it would ever be perfect, a rollout that size. What we're doing about it, that's the main thing. We're not giving up. We're not giving up. We're carrying on. We're taking the fight forward. The service, I admit, and so does our officers, it isn't yet where we need to be, but there's a plan to get us there. We know that the current situation is not sustainable, financially or operationally. And we know we need to move to the next phase of the recovery and the new normal for the waste service. The service has therefore designed a new recycling routes to replace the rounds that were designed from the original implementation. A lot of work has been undertaken to review the assumptions made in the original model and to compare that with what we've seen on the ground following the rollout. The service is confident that we've learned from the first rollout and that these new routes can all be completed by the crews within their normal working day, i.e., removing the need for overtime and Saturday working. This would mean no requirement for mop-up rounds to catch up on missed collections,
except for an extraordinary circumstance. These new routes will require fewer vehicles and therefore fewer drivers and loaders than the service is currently using. It will therefore cost less than it is currently costing. The cost of delivering the new rounds is being firmed up, and that financial information will be provided to members in due course. The introduction of these new rounds is now a matter of weeks away. There is a lot to do before the rollout because we need to make sure that it works, but it's only a matter of weeks away. We're confident that these new rounds will work. We're not saying that they won't see any problems, especially initially, and we're not saying that there won't ever be any miscollections in the future. Every waste service across the UK will always have some miscollections. However, those miscollections will be manageable as a business as usual, and we're very confident that we're not going to return to the problems we faced in June. As far as the cost, Mark, I can't give you those costs at this time because we're still working out the new routes. Just a couple of other things I want to hit on before I finish. It has been a good discussion. We're not going to lie down as a cabinet and as a leader. We're going to fight and we're going to go forward. The ex-lead member called me weak. This all started in 2018. He had 4 years to talk to the cabinet then and to stop them doing this rollout. That's weak leadership. You didn't do it. And just to finish off, weeks before this rollout, I have a photograph out of the press. Councillor Brian Jones, Councillor Terry Mendes, Councillor James Davis, oh, no, ex-MP, James Davis, Gareth Davis, the AM, Justin Marie Evans, and James Elson, all having a photograph outside a recycling plant to say Denbighshire County Council's decision to scrap the blue wheelie bin has been labelled one of the worst decisions. And this is the people who brought it forward from 2018. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry. I shall have to move on. I've finished now. So as far as I'm concerned, I believe the matter has been properly debated and I hope everyone else thinks it has been. So I will ask Councillor Hilditch-Roberts to propose a motion and sum up the points you wish his members to listen to. Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Councillor Judy Matthews, I apologise. I didn't welcome you as a deputy leader in your first council meeting. But can I say what a nice welcome is that a deputy leader wants to engage with us and work together as a council. And I can assure you from my group, we would love to extend that invitation and work together. There's no doubt about that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Because I think, and you touched right, you said from the day you came in, you know, and I think some of my members who have not been here too long have been afraid to challenge because they have been curtailed, or they, you know, or even today when I've said good morning to some members that don't support my motion, refuse to say good morning back. And I made the point, this is not personal, this is being a role of a councillor, and when we leave this chamber, the issue should finish there, in my view. We have the right to have a go if we don't believe it's right, and we have the right to debate it. And Jason can bring the Pandora out of his box, but we can give it back, but we walk away and we forget it in this room. That's what I believe very, very strongly. I'm going to say, I'm sorry Delith was disappointed in me and I've let you down, Delith, as my head teacher. But I want to say I'm actually quite disappointed in you.
Oh, careful.
And also in Martin Hogg.
Careful.
No, I'm nothing careful, it's factual. That's what we're working on here. Is that I'm disappointed that you put the position of your group out in the early part of the debate without listening to the whole debate. And I know Councillor Emrys Wynne has been telling my residents in Ruthin that he's here to hear the full debate and then decide on which way he's going to vote. So I am quite disappointed, and I think that's somewhat naive to take that position so early on in a debate, because you haven't heard the facts that you refer to. And also, I think, Martin, this debate is bigger than the bins. It is about the whole council and the whole service delivery that we give the council and what we do for our residents. And then, in summary, I will challenge Barry and Jason that nobody's given any ideas, because it was my idea to get a local MAG contact at the beginning of this rollout, if you remember rightly, Graham. And I even suggested last week that on the 2 weeks ago now, Tony, when Tony informed us that it was potentially going to get worse over bank holiday, and that we didn't have enough staff, and I suggested that we stop for that week, communicated to all the public, you're not getting a collection, so they know where they stand, they're not waiting for a collection, and that would enable you to regroup. That was my idea, that was my suggestion, so I do take issue with none of the 49 other councillors, which would include yourself and Jason, Barry, if using on your 49 councillors, there's only 48 of us.
46.
At the moment, yeah, at the moment. So I do take with that. But what I do take, and it's interesting that Jason, quite rightly, in his word, mans up. And he has manned up and taken responsibility that it is on his watch. And I said at Cabinet, when he said it, I did appreciate that. And I still do now. And I'm glad he's reaffirmed that today. So there's no shadow of a doubt when other members go back to the blame game, whatever the blame game is, it has been implemented under Jason's watch, and he has admitted that. So I respect that, Jason.
Thank you.
And I think, for me, on the waste, without a shadow of doubt, there's been nearly 2.5 years to plan this, right? And when we'll have the learnings and we'll apologise for it and we'll learn better, but there was no rollout town by town, or there was no, like Conway did, there was no big town, rural town experiment, 3 months. And I think that will all come out in the wash, but we have a lot of work to recover with our residents in the faith that they have lost in the council. And I think Jason may have misunderstood what I meant when I said the knock-on effect of the other staff in the council. It's when Mrs. Jones, who wants a bit of help in social services, can't get through on the phone because all the other residents are ringing about waste. That's the knock-on effect I'm talking. And when you can't report things online anymore, you have to phone. And that's a knock-on effect across the piece, which we can't deny that in what we have. I think there's no doubt from our group that we understand and empathise that officers are doing the best that they can with what they've got. And let's be clear, I want to be really clear, that is not a pop at officers in any shape or form here. That was not the motion is about. I'm just going to touch on, Barry, thank you for your statement. But I'll be honest with you, there's no answers in there yet. There's no timeline. There's no dates. And I think, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, this is actually would be the third Journeys version of Journeys, because it changed after a few weeks as well. So there are still outstanding questions. And Delith seeking clarification for the 3 million. Well, let me just give you the figures. If, as of August the 4th, and Liz, I'm looking at you now, you quoted up to 55 to 60,000 was the cost running the service. If that continues, and you did come into the briefing and say that's not the case, maybe, but if it does, which is a possibility, if we're not on top of it, that equates to over £3 million more a year on this watch. Right? So I'm being categorically clear on here. That is the figure if it carries on this way. And it can't carry on. And I stand here today, I don't regret that my group has brought this motion here today. Because I think we've had the best debate we've had in 2.5 years in this chamber today, where we've been able to have an adult debate without getting personal, without throwing stuff, and where we can walk away from it. So it's clear to me that the Greens and Plaid are going to stick with the status quo, as they mentioned. But what you need to remember, that over the next 12 months, we will be facing the majorities of our schools in deficit. That is our children, our education. We will continue to see a social service overspend. We will continue to see a children's service overspend. We will continue to see the libraries are closed at certain times of the day and they open at 12. But those are the time when they open at 9, the vulnerable could go in to keep warm in the winter. And that's a challenge we're going to face. And I don't care how you defend it in any shape or form, the doors are open less, period. So what I want to conclude is I'd like to thank everybody who's contributed to the debate. And I know there's some frustrations within my group that they've had to suffer over the last 14 weeks. My clear message is to you, and how you want to engage, Jason, if you win the vote today, is the ball is in your court. We can't continue as we are, or we will be, in special measures in the very, very near future. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Jason, I'll let you sum up your points.
Thank you. Can I start, Chair, by thanking you personally, Chair? You said no clapping, but we'll make an exception. Can I thank you, Chair, for chairing this meeting with such fairness and skill, and I think we're all grateful for that.
Jason.
Okay, I'm going to sum up. So we have heard a plan from Barry. We've got a way forward. I've said before that this happened on my watch. It's been said, I'll take responsibility that has happened. We've been working flat out to change this. We've turned a corner. Things are getting better. So the 232 out of 46,000, those 232, it's not acceptable for those 232. Yeah, let's be clear on that. But that's the perspective, and I think we've turned a corner. The chairs and vice chairs group will be formulating the nature and format of a detailed scrutiny process, a process that I welcome. Now that process must, and it will, look at the implications of all the decisions made during the entire timeline and life of this project. It will include, of course, the rollout, what went wrong, what can we learn, but it should also look at, as I say, all of the decisions all down the line. I've got to say this. I'm absolutely amazed that we've heard from the former leader that he was blackmailed, to use his quote, by the Welsh former lead member. Sorry, on the former lead member, that he was blackmailed by the Welsh government. At no point in any of the minutes, the meetings, and I haven't watched the broadcast, but I've read the minutes of the meeting. At no point did he express any concern that what he was supporting and advocating and saying was a good thing to do was not what he really felt. That is the very definition of weak leadership. Now, if you've got a view on the bins, that's fair enough, because some people like the old bin and some people think the trolley box is okay. I know it's hard. I won't say forget the rollout. We can't. But if we concentrate on the issue of whether you like the bins or not, from what Brian has said, he has an opportunity to stand up and say, no, we don't want these. We don't want them. And I don't like what the Welsh government is saying as to how we've got to do them. And he didn't. So it's quite clear why we've got them. And I'm making a point now because I'm absolutely amazed at that statement, to be honest. Hugh, I will push back. I haven't had any suggestion on how over this 12, 15-week period, any other controlling group would have dealt with this huge issue. We've had one suggestion to stop it on a bank holiday weekend. That was a stupid idea. I'm being blunt. It would have been a poor idea. It would have, if we go back to week 1, part of the problem was the compound effect of catching up. We'd had no collections at all in that week. We'd have been back to square one. Not a good idea. So I think I've talked about address those issues on the bins. There's been some wider criticisms of the Cabinet and myself. And as I've said, these are largely, almost wholly, based on unhappiness with extremely difficult financial and budget-related decisions that this Cabinet has had to make. And I'll come back to that in a minute. I want to thank Hugh Evans, my predecessor. Hugh, you may or not believe me, but you were in my notes anyway. And the reason you were in my notes to thank as my predecessor, you were a tough act to follow, because you guided us through the COVID pandemic crisis. And I wear those scars because, as you know, we were online meetings when I worked for RHAN for the Welsh Government, and we were talking through that horribly difficult time. So Hugh provided strong leadership to this council through other times and specifically then. But there is an argument, I think it's an argument to say that at least then, whilst we had an international public health crisis, the magic money tree, which was mentioned earlier, the magic money tree was out and we had money, and there were other pressures. But we don't have that now. We have a national situation where every single local authority in England and Wales faces an existential threat. Let me just very quickly quote from Welsh Audit. More recently, councils have also faced significant real-term reductions in spending power as a consequence of the fastest increase in inflation for decades. Inflation caused by the Conservative Party, Liz Truss's budget. Alongside all of these events, there have also been significant increases in the demand for services. Huge demand. We haven't mentioned that today. Huge demand on our services, including, for example, the fact of an ageing population and the resulting increased demand for some services. These are all factors largely outside of the control of any individual council. We face those realities. So do other councils. That's the truth and that's the concept. It's not accepted by the Conservative group at all. And I'm not going to reply, Justine, Terry, you've made some points, but you fail to understand the fundamental point of the existential threat that this council faces. Now, again, grateful to Hugh, because when Hugh was leader, I was deputy leader of the main opposition group. I've done opposition. It's easy. It's a piece of cake. It's a piece of cake. Opposition. It's easy. When I was in opposition, I challenged the leadership. I was privileged to chair the then governance committee, the audit committee, so I could use that to push an agenda for my political group and challenge budget decisions, speak to Hugh Evans, speak to the leader. Julian Thompson-Hill, former lead member of finance, came to the audit committee. I challenged him. And I wanted to use that challenge to influence the discussion, influence the outcomes, because at that time, worse, not as bad now, it's worse now, but at that time, what we had was austerity round 1, austerity part 1, austerity part 2, this time it's worse, it has been much worse. And you guided us through that, Hugh, but I challenged, and we had adult conversations, and I voted against the budget. So Pauline, that approach about coming together and talking, I'm more than happy to do that. But look, I've got to say it. What I didn't do was I didn't stoop so low to bring a ill-advised, opportunistic, vote, politically motivated vote of no confidence, which we've seen today. Now, I've heard desperate attempts over the weekend from certain elements of the independent group have been phoning other councillors in other groups, offering cabinet seats. What's going on there? What's going on there? That's not leadership at all. Politics, opposition is easy. You can sit on the sidelines and snipe about difficult decisions. Opposition is easy. you can take to the landscape of late night social media, yeah, and on the march with the keyboard warriors. Nothing constructive to say, no contribution to the budget debate at all. Again, schools, cuts to school budgets, libraries, let's be honest about it. We have found a conservative £22 billion black hole, not 3 million, what 3 million, what 22 billion at UK government level. That's going to seep down here. It is, it already has. Don't take my word for it. Speak to the millions and millions who went out and voted the Conservative Party out and voted the Labour government in. The reality of what we face, the financial consequences we face, is purely down to those decisions. I've quoted Welsh Audit there. The budget, the libraries, the toilets. Again, I am not hearing any alternative budget line discussions around where cuts could come from any specific budget lines. There's a bereft, there's no ideas, there's no plans. No group is coming up with anything. Hugh has been very constructive today and mentioned talking, and I didn't say we were going to go bankrupt, but I'll pick up that with you again. But those suggestions, those things about coming together, they will not solve the problem. They will not make those difficult decisions go away. We will still have to make difficult decisions about our services and our priorities. It won't go away, but I welcome that, the one sensible contribution. So thank you for that. The ability to make difficult decisions is all about leadership. I've heard today, and in the budget sessions, and in the questions to Cabinet, and when we talk about in the budget workshop, I have heard nothing but an inability to make difficult decisions, a stepping away from the challenging, difficult circumstances. If you're not prepared to make difficult decisions, and that's all I've heard today, then you provide weak leadership. If the elements of the independent group and the Conservatives group had been in power, or as a result of today were to take power, if they were to carry on that conduct and shy away from difficult decisions, I'll come back to bankruptcy, they would have put this council in bankruptcy. We would have had probably the embarrassment of the first council in Wales to go bust. That hasn't happened because of my strong leadership, facing down budget decisions with excellent help from Gwynedd, my lead member for finance, for Liz, I have to mention Liz's predecessor, Steve Gadd as well, and all the senior team. We analyse and we make these hugely difficult decisions that none of us came into politics to make. I have steered this council through its most challenging crisis. Unprecedented was a word used. Unprecedented financial crisis, which is an existential threat to this council. If we don't make those decisions, if we don't make these cuts, we won't exist. We have to move on to an agenda of transformational change, however that may be. Collaborative working, regional working, use of AI. There's a bit of whispering going on, please, Chair. And we're going to have to look at an alternative way of doing things. The invite is there now to step into the tent. Challenge me, disagree with my decisions. But I'm going to continue to lead this council with the strong support of my cabinet through this unprecedented time that is really a threat to our existence. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jason.
We go to the vote.
Yeah, I would go in that way anyway. Thank you. And thanks very much for thanking me for chairing. I do my best anyway. Thank you. I'll now ask Gary to go through the voting process and then we'll proceed with the vote. And we've had a request for a recorded vote, so that's the way it will go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, yes, that's right. We had a valid request for a recorded vote. And just there may be people watching who don't know what that means. What that basically means is that I will call out the name of each elected member and I will ask them to indicate out loud how they wish to vote. So time since we vetted, for clarity, the notice of motion is effectively a notice of motion to remove the leader and cabinet. So if you want to vote for the leader and cabinet to be removed, then you would vote for or obliged. If you were against the motion and you want the leader and the cabinet to continue, then you would vote against or an erbyn. And if you wish to abstain, you would say abstain or a matal. So is everybody clear? Okay, so I'll read out the names as they are on the list in front of me. And if you could kindly just indicate, as I've explained, I'd be very grateful. So first of all, Councillor Michelle Blakely-Walker.
Against.
Councillor Joan Butterfield. Councillor Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones is absent. Councillor Ellie Chad.
Against.
Councillor Kelly Clewitt.
Against.
Councillor Ann Davis. Councillor Karen Edwards.
For.
Pauline Edwards.
For.
Councillor Gwyneth Ellis.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor James Elson.
For.
Councillor Chris Evans.
For.
Councillor Hugh Evans. Councillor Justine Evans.
For.
Councillor Bobby Feely. Councillor John Harland.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Ellen Heaton.
Against.
Councillor Hugh Hilditch Roberts.
Obliged.
Councillor Martin Hogg.
Against.
Councillor Carol Holliday.
Against.
Councillor Alan Hughes.
Against.
Councillor Hugh Irving.
For.
Councillor Alan James.
Against.
Councillor Brian Jones.
For.
Councillor Delith Jones. Councillor Paul Keddy. Councillor Paul Keddy.
Obliged.
Councillor Diane King.
Against.
Councillor Geraint Lloyd Williams. Councillor Julie Matthews.
Against.
Councillor James May.
Against.
Councillor Jason McClellan.
Against.
Councillor Barry Mellor. Councillor Terry Mendes.
For.
Councillor Raj Metri.
Against.
Councillor Mervyn Parry.
Obliged.
Councillor Adwell Roberts.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Gareth Sandilands.
Against.
Councillor Rhys Thomas. Councillor Andrea Tomlin.
For.
Councillor Cheryl Williams. Councillor David Williams.
Abstain.
Oh.
Councillor Elfed Williams.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Errol Williams. Sorry, beth chi dweud? Councillor Hugh Williams. Councillor Emrys Wynne. Councillor Mark Young. Councillor Peter Scott.
Abstain. As chair, I'll stay neutral. Fifteen, 25, 3, 17, 25. Back up, yeah.
Can you pronounce that?
Do you want me to do? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, members. As a result of the vote, for is 17, abstentions is 3, and against is 25. So the motion is lost. So the cabinet remains where it is. Thank you very much. You? Yes, well, I'll let you. Then we need to have a break because.
Yeah, Chair, can I first of all, just as Jason did, thank you for chairing the meeting and officers. I'd also like to say congratulations on the other side of the motion, but I think it does, the numbers, even though we knew we didn't have the numbers, but the numbers do suggest that we've justified in what we've done to bring this to this arena today, in the hope that we can find a better way working forward. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, everybody. We will take a break. Can we come back for one? If we want to carry on, or pack in all together and go home. 5 past.
That's me.
Was that you? Sorry. Told you to go long now.
Yeah. No, it is next.
No, it is
Yeah,
next.
yeah. So the next item on the agenda, Chair, is to seek the appointment of a vice chair. As you're aware, Councillor Diane King was elected as vice chair at the annual meeting in May, but subsequent to former Councillor Jill German's election as an MP and there being a vacancy on Cabinet, Councillor Diane King has been appointed to Cabinet and therefore had to resign her position as vice chair. So the business before council now is to seek nominations for vice chair for the remainder of this municipal year.
Thank you, Gary. It had my name against it. That's why I started. Right. So have we got any nominations? Reese. Let Reese jump deep. Your hand up first.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd, ag hefyd diolch yn fawr iawn am yr cadeirio cadarn yn ystod rhan cynta'r cyfarfod yma. Mi faswn ni yn hoffi y cynnig enw y cynghorydd Alwel Roberts ar gyfer y swydd yma o is-gadeirydd. Mae Arwel, fel dyn ni'n gwybod, yn broddiadol iawn, wedi bod yn gadeirydd y cyngor o'r blaen, ac ar ddirrybydd fel hyn yn fodlon sefyll yn yr adwy ag gwneud y swydd hyn fel is-gadeirydd y cyngor. Felly mi rydw i'n cynnig enw y cynghorydd Arwel Roberts. Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Reese. Do we have a seconder for Arwel? Diane?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to say it was with a heavy heart that I decided to resign as Vice Chair. And however, I am very pleased to second Arwel to take this position. Thank you.
Dan, have we any other nominations? You explain it. You've told me.
Okay, on the basis that there's only one nomination and that nominee has been proposed and seconded, there's no technical requirement for a vote. That's sufficient to be elected. But Chair, you may want to ask if the meeting wants to show their affirmation by a show of hands.
Yeah, could we just do that? Just everyone in agreement by showing the hands? That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Look forward to working with you, Arwel. Thank you. Oh, does he come up and get to?
I've got the chain. But...
Come here, I've got the chain.
Doing that, you asked the nice one.
That's the chain. I hope that's the one. You want to say a few words, I will?
Okay, yeah.
Mae'n bleser pur gyda'i dderbyn y swydd o fod yn is-gadeirydd. I haven't been in this post before because I moved into the chair straight away, didn't I? So this is new to me to be backing to the great Peter. Can I thank Peter for all the good work he did today? And it is a pleasure for me to chair 2 meetings virtually on bins. Never again. But I did try a few jokes, but didn't go down very well. Our leader here wasn't very happy. No joking matter. All right. Felly mae'n bleser iawn gan ei dderbyn y cynnig a gai ddarllen hwn allan rwan, sgwelwch yn dda. This time, I hope I don't break my glasses. Okay. Rwybi Arwel Roberts, a minnau wedi fethol i swydd is-gadeirydd Cyngor Sir Ddinbych yn datgan fy mod yn cymryd arnaf fy hun y swydd honno, ac y byddwn cyflawni dyletswyrau swydd yn briodol, ac yn ffyddlon hyd eithaf y marn am gallu. Rwyf yn rwymo i barchu'r cod ymddigiad a ddisgwylir oddi wrth aelodau Cyngor Sir Ddinbych, ac sy'n bodoli am y tro ac allai garu adolygu o dro i dro. Diolch yn fawr. Okay, well done, Arwel. Congratulations. You got me for 6 months now, so yeah. Okay, item 5 on my list is an urgent matter, a question from Terry Mendes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to the lead member for planning, Alan James. I won't mention, it refers to an enforcement notice, but I won't mention that. I won't give the reference number. Mr. James has that, and so has the monitoring officer been given that. But I'll just ask my question, that why is an enforcement notice issued to a property in Llandegla on the 7th of September 2020 not being enforced, despite the notice having its 4th birthday 3 days ago?
Alan, I think you will respond, will you? Thank you.
Try. Probably if Councillor Mendes had attended the meeting that was arranged on the 3rd and 9th with 3 officers and myself, it probably wouldn't have needed to come here. But I will say this case has been a legally complex situation. Officers served a planning enforcement notice. The notice was complied with and was not complied with, sorry, and therefore the council decided to undertake works in default to seek compliance with the notice. All works were completed and the site has now been reverted back to its previous condition. Officers also successfully applied for a court injunction to ensure that no unauthorised changes take place again on the land. In addition, officers also prosecuted the landowner, securing a fine. In my view, the main point here is that the site has been remediated. The adverse impact on public community has therefore been remedied in full. I think this is the case that you're referring to. We are on this, but no doubt you'll come back and tell me otherwise.
No, I'm quite happy with that answer, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Terry. Alan is quite happy with that answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Alan. Item 6 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of July 2024. I don't know, in my pack, it starts on page 13. So we go through for accuracy first, please. Accuracy on page 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, nothing on that. All right, I'll go through for matters arising then now, please. Matters arising on page 13, 14, 15, 16, 17,
18, 19. Wonderful, thank you very much. Oh, Hugh Hilditch Roberts again.
Yeah, again, sorry. No, I just page 19, appointment of director of Ddinbych Leisure Limited. I did raise my concerns of the workload of Tony Ward at this point in the council meeting, and I'd just like that minuted as well, please, because of the immense pressure that he's currently under.
Okay, you, that's fine, that's minuted. Julie?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I just want to apologise to council. There is a note there saying I would circulate the written response letter to councillors, and I've just realised I didn't send it. So I will do that this afternoon and smack my hand. Sorry.
No confidence. No confidence in Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Julie. Okay. So, of course, yes. Could somebody propose that the minutes are accurate? Somebody second? Yeah, all in agreement, I can sign them as fine. Thank you. I shall do that when I get the paper. Sharon normally has that. Item number 7 on my agenda is an appointment of the Director of Ddinbych Leisure Limited, and Gary will carry us through this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we appointed a director to fill a vacancy on the board of Ddinbych Leisure Limited in the last council, which was a vacancy arising from the seat on the board to be filled by a member of SLT. And similar to the vice chair, Councillor Diane King had previously been elected by council to be the backbench representative on the board of directors. The composition of the board is set out in the report. Councillor King now occupies the relevant portfolio for education and children's services, and as such occupies a seat on the board in that capacity, which means that the seat on the board to be occupied by a backbench member of the council is vacant. And so the purpose of this report is to seek the appointment of a director to that vacancy. So I'd invite you to ask for nominations, Chair.
Thank you. Can we have nominations then? Mervyn?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to nominate Paul Keddy from our group. Paul's from the south of the county, had a lot of experience with the work he does with the fringe and the entertainment that they do in Llangollen, and he would like to take up this position if it was offered him.
Thank you, Mervyn. Do we have a second for that? Diane? That's sorry. Oh, Karen? Any other nominations, Diane?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to nominate James May, who's worked for Unison for over 12 years, and in the last 8 years predominantly worked for Unison North Wales. James understands the value of sport and recreation in the community, having been involved in a number of community groups, and has witnessed firsthand the value of leisure and recreation in the community.
Thanks, Diane. Do we have a seconder for James? Is that Barry, Cheryl, a few hands up there, yeah. And
I'd like to second
Yes.
James for the role.
okay, no problem. Any other nominations? I take it we have to have a vote then now, Gary, on 2 nominations.
Yes, we do, and it's a matter for members and yourself, Chair, how we do this. I can do a roll call, or you can do a show of hands, or I can do the voting buttons, but then I would have to ask those members who are not present online to indicate the way that they would like to vote. So I'm in your hands, Chair.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, then in the first instance, can we do it by show of hands and save us going through all the automatic stuff? So all in favour of Paul Keddy, please show. Need a counter. Please. There's David Williams not on there, so you can't count that.
Yeah,
No.
19.
And so all those in favour of James May, please show. So the vote was very close, probably because a couple of members have left, but Paul Keddy got 19 and James May got 17. So Paul Keddy is the new member from DLL.
Diolch yn fawr, Bob. Thank you very much, everybody.
You were up there, Jeff Paul. I'm very sorry. These glasses will have to get changed. Well done, congratulations. Okay, the next one on number 8 is council policy on member training, and I think this is going to be taken by Steve Price and Catherine. Oh, Steve, at least.
That's go to another meeting.
Okay, just Steve then.
The purpose of today's report is to bring before you the views gathered from a survey of councillors, lay members and officers, from discussions by the group leaders and final recommendations by the Democratic Services Committee. The covering report summarises the current member training position, where training and development courses have been made available from the start of the term, as you'll be aware, and they continue to be held. So the question of whether there should be specific mandatory training requirements for members is one for full council to determine. That's separate from the normal training that goes on. And the Democratic Services Committee has given its view for your consideration. The committee recommended the setting of mandatory training requirements for certain subjects and roles, so they had a position on that. The committee supported the involvement of the political groups and group leaders in encouraging compliance with mandatory training requirements. To further this, the committee supported the provision of training records to the group leaders and recommended the political groups consider mandatory training issues when allocating seats and roles to members. So the draft council policy for member training has been produced from the Democratic Services Committee's assessment of the survey results. The draft policy is attached as Appendix 1 and the survey results are attached as Appendix 2. If I just briefly summarise the draft policy itself, I'll leave the survey questions where they are, the survey answers where they are for any questions later. But the draft policy has Section A, which is the actual mandatory training that would affect all elected members. Section B is the mandatory training for specific elected and lay members, and I've noted on the title it says just elected members, but there is a bit for the audit committee members as well. And Section C refers to the monitoring and compliance arrangements that would support the policy. So Section C states the importance of individual member responsibility for ensuring mandatory training requirements are fulfilled, and that would be with the support of suitable training, which would need to be held at appropriate intervals and frequencies. So there's suggested wording about how that would be viewed. Section C contains the roles for the group leaders, which actually links in with their existing statutory roles. Group leaders have a statutory duty, fairly new, but existing, which relates to promoting and maintaining high standards of conduct by members of their groups. And this includes the undertaking of certain training courses. Section C also contains the proposed remit for the Standards Committee, which is an existing remit largely, who also report annually to full council. So you could see how, when looking to maintain any policy that you agree, if you do agree it today, how it could actually have some measure of force behind the policy. Section C also calls on the groups themselves to have regards with any instances of non-compliance with the council's policy. So again, if passed today, that is, when considering the allocation of votes to their members. So that's also included in that appendix. The report's recommendation, Chair, is to adopt with any appropriate amendments the member training policy shown in Appendix 1.
Thank you, Steve. Any comments from the floor? No. Do we have to have a seconder for that proposal? For the
Steve can.
Oh, Steve, sorry, you can.
No,
do
you
it.
need a proposer.
Yeah,
Steve can propose it.
Yeah, so propose then. Bobby,
No. Could I just make one little comment? Are there any cost implications? I know you say you're going to try and use people from the departments, but I know, the departments, some of them are quite stretched anyway. particularly planning and licensing, which we've heard about today. What sort of cost implications might there be if we have to go outside for training?
Yes, cost is traditionally and true today. Most of the training costs are absorbed by day-to-day budgets, so officers spending their time putting together courses. That happens in my team, it happens in most teams. I think planning are a good example of that. The planning department probably maintain the most rigorous of the training regimes that members do, and that have historically been mandatory, and they largely do it from their own time. There is a cost to that, but that is how it's done, and that's how largely it is done elsewhere. Occasionally, we find that there is a need for external facilitators. Often that's free, with the WLGA particularly being able to come forward. Once in a while, we do need someone who does charge. There is a small budget which is corporately funded and which we usually underspend on, so that often goes back in the pot, so we're very careful. But it is true that any member training, particularly as everybody is busy, and they are, is one of those things which we just have to do, but mostly it's within existing budgets.
Okay, Bobby. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Okay, then, so the recommendation is the council adopts with any appropriate amendments the draft council policy on member training attached as appendix 1 to this report. So we have a proposer for that, please. Julie, seconder. Mark Young. All in favour? I think a show of hands should be fine. Yep, unanimous again.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Number 9 on my list is a notice of motion from is that you, Dallas?
Yes.
Thank you.
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd, a diolch I chi am dderbyn y cynnig yma ar ar agenda sydd yn llawn yn barod. So dwi'n ddiolchgar I chi am dderbyn hyn. Mae'r cynnig sydd gennym ni gan y grŵp Plaid Cymru yn ymwneud â'r cyllideb a'r pwysau ar ein proses o balansio, fel dyn ni wedi clywed eisoes bore yma. Mae galw mewn gwasanaethau cymdeithasol plant a phobl ifanc yn cynyddu ar y fath radda na sgwelid yn blaenorol yn y sir. Mae hyn yn gosod pwysau aruthrol ar ein cyllideb fel cyngor. Chydig yw'r arfau sydd ar gael I ni fel awdurdod I fynd i'r afel ar galw yma. Ac o ganlyniad, mi rydyn ni'n ddibynnol ar Lywodraethau San Steffan a Chaerdydd I weithredu mewn modd cyfrifol yn hyn y beth. Un o'r pethau allai gael dylanwad mawr yw trwy ddod ag anghyfiawnder y polisi terfyn bydd dal 2 blentyn presennol I ben. Polisi a llai olygu hyd at 2,265 o bunnoedd o gredyd plentyn ychwanegol I deuluodd, ble mae trydydd plentyn neu blentyn dilynol enwydd ar ôl Ebrill 2017 o'r gymharu â'r teuluoedd cyn hynny. Yn ddiweddar, fe wrthododd Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig I ddiddymu'r terfyn bydd dal 2 blentyn drwy welliant I araith y brenin. O'r aelodau seneddol sy'n cynrychioli Sir Ddinbych, dim ond Liz Saville Roberts bleidleisio dros y gwelliant yma, gyda'r aelodau seneddol eraill yn pleidleisio yn ei erbyn. Felly, fel aelod grŵp Plaid Cymru, dwi'n apelio at bob un o'r cynghorwyr yma I ddod at yn gilydd fel cynghorwyr I ysgrifennu at yr aelodau seneddol ac annog yr aelodau hynny I ail feddwl I penderfyniad o safbwynt a chefnogi'r angen I ddiddymu'r terfyn 2 blentyn hyn bydd plant a theuluoedd mwy o bregus ein cymdeithas ac mwyn cynorthwyo I ostwng y galw ar ein gwasanaethau cymdeithasol yn lleol. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Seconder, please. I'm very, very sorry. Julie?
Yeah, thank you, diolch, Chair. Okay, I'm speaking on behalf of the Labour group here, so I'd like to take the opportunity to second the motion and to thank Plaid colleagues for putting this motion forward to full council. We do agree with the need to address the pressure that children's and youth services are under in Denbighshire County Council, and recognise that many of the issues dealt with by the service and across many of our other services are as a result of low incomes and levels of deprivation. Not just in Denbighshire and not just in Wales, the number of children in poverty across the UK has risen by 700,000 over the last 14 years. The Welsh Government launched its own child poverty strategy in January this year. Also, tackling child poverty is central to the aims of the new UK government, with a child poverty task force set up to work cross-governments to address the causes of poverty. We are all aware the UK finances, government finances, we've mentioned this morning, and they have been left in an awful situation. As we know from the financial challenges that we continue to grapple with in local governments and in Denbighshire, what a government would like to do and what it can do not necessarily align. We wholeheartedly agree to write to MPs on this important issue. However, we do need to keep this important fact very much in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Any other on that matter? Rhys.
Ie, diolch yn fawr Cadeirydd ag llongyfarchiadau i'r is-Gadeirydd newydd hefyd. Dwi'n hynod o ddiolchgar o glywed bod ein cyfeillion yn y grŵp llafur yn gefnogol i'r cynnig yma sy'n dod o flaen y cyngor heddiw. Mae'n galonogol iawn bod chi'n gweld pethau yn yr un ffordd. Fel yr aelod o'r cabinet sydd â cyfrifoldeb dros gymunedau, yna mae rhaid I ni gofio bod yna rai rhannau o'n sir ni sydd, a mae rhaid I fi ddarllen o, sydd yn dioddau o amddifadedd lluosog uchaf yng Nghymru. O hwnna ydy'r, on the Welsh indicators of multiple deprivation, some of our areas suffer are there amongst the highest in Wales. Felly mae'r amddifadedd yma wedi wreiddio'n ddwfn yn ein cymunedau ni, ac mae hynna'n golygu bod nifer fawr o blant yn byw mewn tlodi yn ein sir ni ar y diffiniad y Llywodraeth o dlodi. Ers 2017, mae'r cyfyngiadau ar credyd uniongyrchol a credydau treth i'r trydydd plentyn ar ôl yr ail blentyn, mae hwnna wedi gwneud y tlodi yn waith I deuluoedd. Ac wrth gloi, dim ond un neu ddau o bethau, mae'n debyg bod 59% o'r teuluoedd sydd yn cael ei effeithio gan y cap yma yn deuluoedd lle mae'r oedolion mewn gwaith. Ac hefyd fod y cap yma yn gwneud pobl yn dlotach, ond dydy o ddim yn annog pobl oedolion I edrych am waith nag I edrych am waith sy'n talu mwy. Felly, da ni yn cynnig hyn o'ch blaen chi bod ni fel cyngor yn sgwennu at ein aelodau seneddol yn rhanbarth Gogledd Cymru. Felly, diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd.
You?
I think we should move it to the vote, Chair.
Going to. I was going to ask if anyone was there, but fine. Do we all agree? Yeah. Do we all agree? Can we just show by hands that we carry on as the motion suggests? Again, I've got that unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well done. Last one on my list is number 10, the Council Forward Work Programme. Gary will give me this one.
You've got the Council Forward Work Programme there, Chair. Just a note in respect of the November meeting, there is a piece there for the approval of updated governing arrangements for the Corporate Joint Committee. That's being led by Gwynedd, and so when we have the arrangements, we'll bring them. I hope to have them by then, but if we don't, we'll have to defer it. The other thing I would say is the Council Workshop Forward Work Programme. It's actually slightly out of date. There's been more populated in it since the papers were published, but the important note is that in November, you'll see that the workshop talks about, again, the governance arrangements for the Corporate Joint Committee. That will either be shared with or replaced by a presentation by NRW in respect of the national park. So they've asked to come to a council workshop in November. So we've agreed to do that, and depending on the length of their presentation, we might do the CJC at the same time. It was just to flag that up as a possibility.
Thank you very much, Gary. I've got nothing else on my agenda list. I said at the start, I'd love to get to number 11 early doors, and I have. I've done very well. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thanks for behaving. You've been very, very good. Thank you very much for the day. Super.